Chapter 1805. Looking at Wuxia and Lily standing side by side in the middle of the street, exuding an indescribable aura, Claire, Fianna, and Alice's heart sank. In this sword dance of the elves, the most vigilant target was undoubtedly the Purgatory Apostles. In this team of representatives from the Alpha Empire, every member's strength was very outstanding. If you didn't count the ace of each team, namely Noah, Lotus, Leola, and Luminalise, the Purgatory Apostles were undoubtedly the strongest. Wuxia alone was enough to give him a headache. This girl with a cute appearance but a cruel heart, if she could freely use a military fairy, her battle strength would definitely be on par with ace generals like Leola and Luminalise. Lily was more of a scout type, but the attack just now also proved that this girl's strength was also not weak. She was definitely stronger than any of Claire, Fianna, and Alice. Facing these two opponents, even if there were three of them, the situation was quite harsh. Compared to Claire, Fianna, and Alice's team, the other side's performance was quite relaxed. You really did make a move, Lily. Wuxia stared at Lily. As soon as I saw you disappear, I knew you would definitely launch a sneak attack. After all, I'm not like you. Compared to a frontal battle, it's more suitable to use the assassination method. Lily tightly held a dagger in her hand and glanced at Claire, Fianna, and Alice. Moreover, if I can smoothly take them down, you won't have to make a move. Although they were all from the same assassin organization, Wuxia and Lily were definitely not companions. No. It should be said that in that kind of organization, no one could be treated as a companion. Otherwise, they would be stabbed by the people around them. Therefore, although Wuxia and Lily acted together, one didn't put the person beside her in her eyes at all, the other was always monitoring the person beside her. There was no trust between them at all. The only thing worth mentioning was that Wuxia and Lily both had a crazy target in their hearts. Wuxia's target was Lotus. Lily's target was Red Lotus. Now that Lotus and Red Lotus have decided to act together, Wuxia and Lily are together. Otherwise, Lily really didn't want to stay with Wuxia. This was because Wuxia might kill him at any time if she was in a bad mood. Wuxia was definitely capable of doing such a thing. And if Wuxia wanted to kill him, Lily probably wouldn't have any strength to fight back. Before the Education Academy was destroyed, all of the trained assassins had a ranking. At that time, Lotus firmly held the first place and was not surpassed by anyone. Wuxia was in second place and people called him a monster. As for Lily, she was only ranked 7th in the academy. If Wuxia wanted to kill Lily, Lily was definitely not a match for Wuxia. Of course, that was if Wuxia had enough military elves to squander. Without the military sprite, Wuxia was just a fragile little girl. Even Lily could easily deal with her. In other words, Wuxia was a terrifying existence when she had a military sprite. Moreover, this girl didn't have the concept of good and evil. Just like how a child would think that a hero killing a monster was a matter of course, in Wuxia's eyes everyone could be killed. Therefore, Wuxia would never hesitate to kill someone. If I can get rid of the opponent, Wuxia, you won't have to kill, Lily reminded. Otherwise, if I really let you kill, your qualifications to participate will definitely be revoked. I already told you Wuxia doesn't care about that kind of thing. Wuxia only cares about my sister. Wuxia pouted. Lily, you better not meddle in other people's business. But, isn't your target the male elf envoy who's been pestering Lion-sama? Lily tried her best to persuade him. If you kill someone else and lose your qualifications, then you won't be able to fight Noadoria. Oh, Wuxia frowned. Forget it, since it's like this, Wuxia will bear with it for a while. Saying this, Wuxia raised her head and looked at Claire, Fianna, and Alice. That's how it is. Big sisters, please tell me the whereabouts of Big Brother. That way, Wuxia won't have to go through so much trouble to kill you. So you're here for Noah? Alice held the ceremonial pike-shaped elven device tightly in her hand as she shouted in a delicate voice. If that's the case, then there's nothing more to say. Also, we don't know where Noah is right now. Fianna rolled her eyes and said, if we knew, we would have met up long ago. You don't know where Big Brother is. Wuxia lowered her shoulders in disappointment. I thought I would be able to get my revenge today. No, it doesn't matter if they know where Noadoria is or not. Lily's gaze fell on Claire, Fianna, and Alice. As long as we capture them and spread the news, we'll definitely be able to lure out Noadoria. That's right. Maoya reacted and clapped her hands happily. Since that's the case, big sisters, please stay with Maoya for the time being. Don't even think about it. Claire gripped the flame whip tightly and glared at Maoya. I won't let you succeed. As soon as she finished speaking. Really? Maoya's eyes seemed to have lost their luster and became cloudy. If that's the case, then come and play with Maoya. Maoya raised one hand. On the wrist of that hand, a simple bracelet began to emit black and red light. Maoya! Lily was shocked. You can't use that elf. You'll kill them. So annoying. Maoya ignored Lily. It's none of your business what Maoya wants to do. But at this moment, bang! Amidst the sound of an explosion, purgatory-like flames ignited and rushed into the air. In an extremely old building, a series of footsteps gradually sounded, echoing in the surroundings. Noah, Lindsley, Leola, and Aster slowly walked out of the building and came to a street. We're finally out, Lindsley said with a sigh of relief. I thought we'd be trapped there until the end of the competition. Thank you, Aster. Noah patted Aster's head. Luckily you led the way, or else it would have been troublesome. I'm Master's sword. Aster's face was still expressionless, but his mysterious eyes were squinting because of the comfort. Helping Master is a matter of course. Since we're out, then let's part ways here, Leola said without hesitation. We'll have to fight sooner or later. If you don't attack me now, then I'll find you when I'm fully recovered. After saying that, Leola turned around and slipped into an alley. Before Noah and Lindsley could reply, she disappeared. Noah and Lindsley didn't ask her to stay. After all, just like what Leola said, they would have to fight sooner or later, so there was no reason for them to continue moving together. Noah and Lindsley were already being extremely kind by not attacking Leola, while she was in a weakened state. Leola was also aware of it, which was why she left. If she stayed, Noah and Lindsley wouldn't mind protecting her until she recovered, right? As her opponent, Leola had no reason to let them go to this extent for her. Leaving was also a matter of course. Next, whether or not Leola would encounter other elven envoys and be taken down by them would be her own problem. If Leola could hold on, she would eventually appear before Noah. When that happened, Noah thought it might be possible to satisfy Leola's fighting spirit. Right, Noah? Lindsley turned around and looked at Noah with her bright eyes. How's the child? Chapter 1806. Under Lindsley's bright gaze, Noah shrugged. With a flip of his hand, a piece of elven ore immediately appeared in his hand. It was the most common piece of elven oregano. However, this piece of elven ore flickered with a ripple-like luster, looking very dazzling. Looking at that piece of elven ore, Lindsley hurriedly spoke. Miss Elven, are you all right? As soon as Lindsley's words fell, a sound came from the elven ore in Noah's hand. I'm fine, I don't feel any discomfort. The elven girl who had been sealed and had lost her memories and power was now sealed in this elven ore. Elven ore could be used to seal elves and use the sealed elven's power. However, this kind of use was mostly a one-time use. After using it, the sealed elven would leave. In order to bring the elven girl out of the underground maze, Noah followed Aster's suggestion and sealed her in this elven oregano. Originally, there was a barrier in the underground maze that could imprison the elven girl, making her unable to leave. That kind of barrier was the type that could be continuously regenerated. Unless the core was destroyed, otherwise, even if Noah used Aster's power to break the barrier, it would immediately recover. It would be of no use. Therefore, Aster suggested that Noah use the elven ore to seal the elven girl inside and bring her out of the underground maze. This way, with Noah's curse resistance, if he carried the elven ore with him, the barrier would not work. Therefore, Noah brought the elven girl out of the underground maze. As for the seal on the elven girl that made her lose her memories and power, it could only be removed through a proper unsealing ceremony. This ceremony was not very difficult. Usually, the more profound witch of the gods' parliament would know how to do it. Since this was the case, as a former elven princess candidate, Fianna had no reason not to know the unsealing ceremony. Noah's plan was to wait until the end of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Then let Fianna help the elven girl with the unsealing ceremony. But ordinary elven ore can be used to seal the highest-ranked elven in human form. It's really unbelievable. Lindsley sighed. For a high elf like Miss Elf, her power should be sealed by the blood of the Elf King. Even so, I've already lost my powers. I'm just a half-assed elf with empty ranks, the elven girl said. Thus, even if it was an ordinary elven or that sealed me, it would not be strange at all. Wait until the Elven Sword Dance Festival is over. Our companions will be able to remove the seal for you so that you can regain your strength and memory, Noah said to the elven oar in his hand. Before that, I'll have to trouble you to stay in the spirit oars for the time being. It doesn't matter. Being able to leave the underground maze is already something worth celebrating. We can take our time with the rest. The elven girl's voice didn't sound anxious at all, as if she really wasn't in a hurry at all. Compared to the lifeless underground labyrinth, the feeling of staying in the elf oar is much better. You can just do what you want to do. There's no need to worry about me. That's good. Noah smiled. Then please take a break for the time being. After saying that, Noah took out his gift card and stored the elven, or that sealed the elven girl into the gift card. If he carried it with him, Noah was worried that he would accidentally make a mistake during a battle. However, if he stored it in the gift card, he wouldn't have to worry about that. After all, the gift card could be summoned at will. Normally, he could completely make it disappear as if it was hidden in his body. There was no need to carry it around as he wished. After seeing Noah storing the elven oar in the gift card, Lindley seemed to be relieved. She asked Noah, "Then Noah, what should we do next?" Hearing that, Noah was just about to answer when a shrill roar suddenly shook the air. Roar, 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 roar. The shrill roar shook the atmosphere, causing the ground to tremble slightly. What's wrong? Lindley was shocked. What happened? Noah didn't answer. Instead, he turned his head abruptly and looked in a direction. There, a huge pillar of fire soared into the sky, setting off bursts of raging fire. Like a shock wave, it attacked in all directions. And in the pillar of fire that soared into the sky, a huge figure gradually appeared. It was an evil spirit whose entire body seemed to be formed by magma. Its body was constantly burning with flames, and its eye sockets had a red glow like a furnace. The evil spirit held a very thick flame whip in its hand. Black smoke billowed in its mouth, and its body surged with extremely powerful divine power. It faced the sky and let out a shrill roar. That scene was simply like a ghost from purgatory breaking into the human world. It caused the temperature in the air to suddenly rise by a few levels. Looking at the evil spirit that was burning with raging fire, Lindley's pretty face became a little pale. What is that? Noah focused his eyes and stared at the evil spirit holding the flame whip. His dark and deep pupils flickered slightly. Aster, on the other hand, stared at the evil spirit in the flames and suddenly spoke. "Master, that's the magic flame elf Vera Oka." Vera Oka? Noah looked at Aster in surprise. "You said that's the magic flame elf Vera Oka?" "Yes." Aster nodded. "In the Elven War, that magic flame elf was once sent to the front line, so I have memories of its existence." Magic flame elf Vera Oka. Lindley seemed to have reacted and muttered. "I remember that it seems to be a tactical military elf that has been sealed and abandoned, right?" "That's right." Noah looked at the evil spirit that was burning with flames. Its name comes from the true name of the demon god that destroyed many cities and countries in the Elven War. It was called the evil spirit that controlled the flame of annihilation. It was used in the later stages of the Lambar War that swept all the countries on the continent. But because it was too unstable, it was sealed and abandoned after only 2 uses. Noah had been immersed in the library of the sanctuary 2 days before the finals to collect information. Among them, there was a record of that magic flame elf. It said that it's the highest level of military elves that a country can have. Apart from the tactical military elves that are no longer allowed to be used and have all been sealed, it's the strongest military elf, Noah said in a deep voice. In terms of strength, I'm afraid that even Myra's Sage Monarch division is inferior to it. Without more than 10 excellent elves to control it, I'm afraid that they can't even order it around. Why would such a military elf appear here? Lindley said in shock, then seemed to understand something. Could it be that the elf named Mauya in the Purgatory Apostle summoned it? She can even control the military sprite, which is the highest level in the tactical level, by herself? Noah stared at the evil ghost bathed in the flames of the Red Lotus. After a while, amidst Lindley's exclamation, he grabbed her in his arms and turned into a streak of light, flying towards Vera Aluka's location. Whoosh! Amidst a piercing sound, the flame whip formed from flames cut through the air, as if it was burning the atmosphere to nothingness, and ruthlessly smashed down. Bang! A muffled explosion sounded. The flaming whip was like the heaviest stick, heavily smashing the ground. Suddenly, the shattered ground was like steel that had been calcined, becoming fiery red. The gravel was directly baked into magma, like volcanic rock that had erupted, mixed in with the violent shock wave, shaking in all directions. Ah! Claire, Fianna, and Alice were all sent flying by the violent shock waves. They rolled on the ground for a while before finally stopping. Ugh! Lindsley and Alice both let out gloomy sounds. Claire raised her head with difficulty and looked forward. There, a young girl named Maoya was sitting on the red lotus wraith's shoulder. An imprint on the back of one of Maoya's hands blossomed with light, illuminating Maoya's innocent yet cruel face. Chapter 1807. The flames of the red lotus burned on the body of the flame spirit named Vera Lorca, dyeing the surroundings a fiery red. Maoya didn't seem to be affected by the flames at all. She sat on the shoulder of the flame spirit and looked down at Claire, Fianna, and Alice, licking her lips in excitement. What's wrong? Big sisters? Is this not enough? Faced with Maoya's provocation, not to mention Alice, even Fianna bit her lips and struggled to stand up from the ground. Claire also struggled to get up and stared at the flame spirit. Feeling the terrifying divine power and shocking heat from the spirit, her pretty face couldn't help but turn pale. She actually completely controlled that kind of military spirit by herself. There should be a limit no matter how exaggerated it is, right? The advantage of military spirits was that they had a wide range of uses. It didn't matter how strong the spirit was, as long as one had the aptitude, they could draw out a certain amount of power from the spirit. In other words, military spirits couldn't display their full power. They couldn't transform into spirit equipment like contracted spirits, and their innate power was limited. They could only display a portion of their power. However, this petite girl in front of her could completely display the full power of a military spirit. Moreover, a military spirit like Vera Lorca, which belonged to the strongest level of tactical spirits, should have at least 10 outstanding witch adepts controlling it successfully, but Maoya did it all by herself. This fact made Claire's heart bitterly cold. Even if it's an expert who receives special training to control military spirits, isn't it a bit too much to reach this level? The one who responded to Claire wasn't Maoya, but Lily, who stood to the side and quietly watched the development of the situation. Maoya has an innate ability. She can display the spirit's power to the limit and forcibly squeeze out all of the spirit's power, Lily said coldly. Although that will make the sprites that Maoya touches go berserk and even be destroyed in the end, Maoya can already control this ability to a certain extent by transplanting the spell seal. Not only can Maoya use a high-grade military sprite alone, but she can also use all the power of the military sprite. As long as Maoya has a military sprite in her hand, you won't have any chance of winning. Even if I don't have any elves to use, Maoya won't lose to these useless big sisters, Maoya pouted, then raised her hand that was branded with the spell and giggled. However, when there's an elf that can be used, Maoya is the strongest other than my sister. Big sisters, come and try the power of Maoya's fool's pincer. After speaking, the magic flame spirit with flames burning all over its body immediately raised the whip of flames in its hand. Amidst a sharp whistling sound, it heavily swung down in the direction of the group of young girls. Bang! The heavy flame whip once again smashed into the ground, turning the ground into a fiery red like steel that had been calcined. At the same time, it stirred up violent winds and magma-like rock fragments, exploding into the air. Ah! The group of young girls suddenly let out sorrowful cries and were blown away again. However, this time, Alice reacted and waved the magic device in her hand. Wind, blow to your heart's content. A whirlwind suddenly blew along the path of Alice's elven device, sweeping up the group of young ladies. The group of young ladies seemed to be held up by an invisible hand, finally avoiding the fate of rolling on the ground again. Once she steadied herself, Claire threw out the flame whip in her hand. Go, Scarlet! The flame whip that was thrown out ferociously swelled into a ball of flames and turned into a flaming cat. Gee! The flame spirit named Scarlet let out a sharp cry. Like a streak of fiery red light, It streaked across the sky and pounced in the direction of Virayakur. However, almost at the same time, the magic flame spirit Virayakur let out a terrifying roar. Its entire body seemed to explode, bursting into flames. Boom! A muffled sound rang out as the explosive flame turned into a substantial shockwave, sending Scarlet flying away like a fiery red stream of light. Then the magic flame spirit's whip of flames once again swung down, burning the atmosphere and causing an ear-piercing sound. At the same time, it smashed fiercely in Claire's direction like a thunderbolt. If she had been hit by that terrifying attack, Claire would have been crushed to pieces in an instant and incinerated by the raging flames, leaving no trace behind. Just as Lily had said, Maoya didn't care about any consequences and wouldn't show any mercy. Once she attacked, it would be a fatal attack. Claire, who had returned to her elf form with the magic device, could only look on helplessly as the magic flame whip smashed towards her like a thunderbolt. At this time, Fianna's delicate shout sounded from behind. "Georges!" A flash of light suddenly burst forth in front of Claire, turning into a fully armed pure white knight elf. It raised the shield in its hands and blocked in front of Claire. Boom! The flame whip, which was capable of burning the earth into magma, landed heavily on the thick shield, causing a burst of flames. Crack! The terrifying force and impact caused cracks to appear on Georges's shield. Liar! Fianna covered her mouth in disbelief. He actually cracked Geokias's shield with a single blow? It must be known that even when facing the bombardment of Vercelia with a large number of spell engravings, Geokias's shield was able to withstand it stably. And now, a single attack from the flame elf Viroka was able to crack Geokia's shield so cleanly? Is this the power of the strongest military elves in the tactical grade? Alice clenched the magic device tightly and clenched her teeth. No, our chances of winning are too low. We can't continue fighting like this. That's right. Claire retreated to Fianna and Alice's side and said in a deep voice, "We can't continue fighting like this. We have to retreat." Unfortunately, Claire, Fianna, and Alice's plan had long been seen through by Lily, who had been quietly watching from the side. "I knew you would definitely choose to retreat. This is a very wise choice, but I've already seen through it." As soon as she finished speaking, several vines suddenly burst out from the ground behind Claire, Fianna, and Alice. Immediately after, the vines twisted and coiled around the three girls like agile pythons. Claire, Fianna, and Alice were all tied up by the vines and pulled up into the air. Damn it! Let go of me. The three girls immediately struggled. However, no matter how they struggled, they couldn't break free. The outcome has been decided. Lily walked up. "You're too careless, elf emissary of the Austrian Empire." Lily. Maoya was still sitting on the flame elf's shoulder. She frowned and spoke with dissatisfaction. "Who told you to interfere? Isn't it fine as long as you can achieve your goal?" Lily sighed. "If I don't interfere, you'll definitely forget to be merciful and kill him, right? I don't need Lily to interfere with my business." Maoya was still dissatisfied, but she didn't say anything else. "Forget it. Maoya's goal is that big brother anyway. I'm not interested in big sisters." "You?" Claire, Fianna, and Alice glared at Maoya. "Alright, let's get back to the main topic." Lily raised her eyes and looked at the group of girls. "You really don't know where Noah Dole is?" "We don't know," Alice answered without any hesitation. "Even if we knew, we wouldn't tell you." "Is that so?" Lily nodded without changing her expression. "It's fine. We'll find him." As his words faded, an indifferent voice rang out. "You're looking for me, right?" Chapter 1808. "I'm the one you're looking for, right?" When such a voice rang out and entered the ears of everyone present, the expressions on everyone's faces froze. In the next second, Claire, Fianna, and Alice were pleasantly surprised. Lily's pupils suddenly shrank. As for Maoya, after being slightly startled, her eyes suddenly brightened. Soon after, a gorgeous shout resounded. "Magic ice arrow projectile!" A barrage of ice arrows suddenly appeared in the air like raindrops, shooting toward Lily's direction. Lily's expression was startled. Without any hesitation, she stomped on the ground and jumped up. Under such circumstances, the ice arrows flew past Lily's original position and accurately landed on the vines binding Claire, Fianna, and Alice. Poochie poochie poochie. Along with a series of snapping sounds, the thick vines were directly cut off by the ice arrows. Claire, Fayanna, and Alice immediately fell from midair. Ah! Fayanna fell on her but on the ground. It was so painful that tears almost flowed out of her eyes. On the other hand, Claire and Alice stumbled to the ground and raised their heads, looking in the direction the ice arrows had come from. There, holding an ice bow, Lindsley stood on the top of a building. She combed her hair and had a confident smile on her face. Looks like we made it in time. Lindsley. Alice was pleasantly surprised once again. Undoubtedly, that idiot is an archer. Why is she standing in such a conspicuous place? Claire complained. Lily, who had dodged Lindsley's arrow with a leap, realized that she had been tricked. Lindsley's goal from the beginning wasn't to deal with Lily, but to help Claire, Fayanna, and Alice out of their predicament. However, that kind of thing was no longer important. Lily gripped the dagger in her hand and shouted with a dignified expression. "No, Adole, since you're here, then come out." Everyone suddenly fell silent. After a while, Lily's pointy ears twitched slightly. She abruptly turned her head and looked in a direction. Noah appeared beside Claire, Fayanna, and Alice and helped Fayanna up. "Are you okay?" Noah asked. "I'm fine." Fayanna rubbed her butt and smiled bitterly. "But it was dangerous. Why are you here?" Claire hurriedly trotted over. "Didn't we agree to act separately? It's a long story." Noah handed Fayanna over to Claire. "Fortunately, I'm here. Otherwise, you would have all been eliminated. Their target seems to be you, not us." Alice also came over and said with an annoyed expression. "They just want to capture us." Fayanna said. "Is that so?" Noah nodded. "Got it." After saying that, Noah turned his gaze and glanced at Lily, who was looking at him with a guarded expression. Then he looked at Mao, who was sitting on the shoulder of the magic flame elf. "I finally meet you, big brother." Maoya's smile was very sweet. "Maoya has been looking for you for a long time." Noah didn't reply. He just took a step forward and arrived in front of Claire, Fayanna, and Alice. He looked at Maoya, who was smiling very sweetly, and said with an indifferent expression, "You were in such a hurry to find me because of Lily and Asubal, right?" "That's right." Maoya's smile was still on her face, but her eyes became a bit dim. "Who told Big Brother to keep pestering Big Sister? Maoya had no choice but to kill you." Claire, Fayanna, Alice, and even Lindley in the distance trembled slightly. Undoubtedly, Maoya was younger than anyone present. She was only 1 year older than Mira, who was rated as the youngest participant of this year's Elven Sword Dance Festival. Her tone was also very innocent, but it gave people an indescribable feeling of terror. Clearly, Maoya sounded like a child joking. Every time she opened her mouth, she would kill. She was completely serious. Yet, this girl had the strength to start a massacre. Under such circumstances, the feeling of terror that Maoya gave people was very unusual. This was also the reason why Maoya was called a monster in the teaching academy. She was younger than anyone else, but she had killed more people than anyone else. She had no concept of good and evil. She could take someone's life with a single thought. It was really too terrifying. Therefore, even Lily, who had always been by her side, was very afraid of Maoya. However, this wasn't the first time Noah had met this type of person. Thus, Maoya's innocent and cruel appearance made Noah think of Ilya. When they met for the first time, Noah felt that Maoya was very similar to Ilya. Not in terms of appearance but in terms of the concept of good and evil. For these two children, killing someone was just a matter of a thought. They only needed a small reason. However, that wasn't a reason for Maoya to casually kill her companions. "Want to kill me?" Noah nodded calmly. "Then come." That extremely calm appearance gave everyone present a feeling. That was, Noah didn't see Maoya as a threat at all. Big Brother seems to look down on Maoya. The smile on Maoya's face finally disappeared. Her immature but cute face seemed to be covered in a shadow, becoming expressionless. "Since it's like this, then you can go die." The rune on the back of Maoya's hand suddenly blossomed with a dazzling bloody light. Roar, 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 roar. The demonic flame spirit holding the flame whip suddenly roared crazily. Its whole body erupted with a terrifying divine power and heat. It no longer waved the flame whip in its hand that could burn the earth like before. Instead, like a furious ghost, it madly rushed in the direction of Noah. In an instant, the ground trembled under the demonic flame spirit's stomp. Each step of Viracocha shattered the ground where it landed, blasting a medium-sized pit, and became boiling hot like volcanic magma. In the blink of an eye, the demonic flame spirit violently rushed in front of Noah. It raised an arm, and like a meteor falling from the sky, it heavily blasted in the direction of Noah. Wherever that punch passed, the atmosphere was completely squeezed clean. It shook and created a terrifying sonic boom, causing the temperature to suddenly rise to a shocking level. Compared to the demonic flame spirit, which was the most powerful tactical military spirit, Noah, who was at least 10 times smaller in size, was like a small boat in a storm. His robe fluttered in the wind, and he looked extremely small and fragile. "Be careful!" the 4 girls, Claire, Lindley, Fianna, and Alice, exclaimed. However, Noah calmly looked at the huge fist that seemed to be formed from magma and was covered in flames. He gently lifted one of his hands. At this moment, all the divine power flowing in Noah's body turned into magic power. Like electric wires, magic power patterns suddenly climbed up Noah's arm. Roar, 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 roar. The demonic flame spirit once again let out a roar that shook the air, and heavily blasted that punch at Noah, who was extremely small compared to it. Undoubtedly, the demonic flame spirit directly rushed up to make a close-range attack with the shockingly destructive flame whip in its hand. His crazed appearance told everyone that he was going crazy. Viracocha had lost control. After all, this demonic flame spirit was very unstable to begin with, which was why it was abandoned. Moreover, Maoye's fool's pincer could make the spirit go berserk, so it wasn't strange for Viracocha to completely fall into madness. And this berserk state caused Viracocha's power to increase exponentially. A simple punch could probably even match a demon god-level sprite. However, at this moment Noah finally moved. His fist, which was covered with magic patterns like electric wires, blasted out without any fancy moves. Bang! Along with a muffled explosion, the demonic flame spirit Viracocha, who enjoyed the reputation of being the most powerful of the tactical grade, and was even sent to the front lines to fight during the Elven War, suddenly exploded into a pile of fragments. Chapter 1809. Bang! 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 Amidst a resounding boom, the lava-like rocks that made up the demonic flame spirit's body abruptly crashed to the ground. After scorching the ground, the flames on the rocks gradually extinguished, finally turning into pitch-black reefs. Maoye, who was sitting on the shoulder of the magic flame elf, directly fell to the ground. The pain didn't make Maoye cry out. She didn't even react. Maoye sat on the ground in a daze and looked at the pitch-black reefs scattered all over the ground. Her mind was blank as if she had lost her soul. Not to mention Maoye, even Lily's pretty face abruptly changed, and her eyes were filled with shock. Claire, Lindley, Fianna, and Alice were also stunned and couldn't react. Out of everyone present, only Noah withdrew his fist. He glanced at Maoye, who was sitting on the ground in a daze, and threw out such a sentence. "Are you satisfied now that you've killed it?" Satisfied? Are you kidding me? The entire battle didn't even take 3 seconds. In the end, Noah finished off the magic flame elf, which was one of the strongest among the tactical military elves and had been squeezed out of all its power by Maoye's the Fool's Pincer, with a single punch. Noah himself was unscathed, as if he had done something insignificant. How could anyone be satisfied with that? That was an elf that reached the demon god level in an instant when it went berserk. It was finished off with one blow just like that? Impossible. Impossible. Maoye murmured as if she had lost her soul. Maoye. Maoye. Gulp. Claire, Lindley, Fianna, and Alice couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva, but they still felt thirsty. Finished off a demon god level elf with one blow? Was it even possible for something like that to happen? Unfortunately, Noah didn't seem to realize how shocking his action was. He stepped forward and took out the magic stones from Maoye's pocket while she was still in a daze. Buzz! In the next moment, a magic array appeared on the ground beneath Maoye. It bloomed with light and covered Maoye. Then both Maoye and the array disappeared. Moya, who was able to compete with ace elven ambassadors like Leola and Luminaris, left just like that. Noah turned around and looked at Lily while holding the magic stone that he found on Maoye's body. You're next. Under Noah's gaze, Lily couldn't help but take a few steps back, her eyes filled with fear. Lily, who even Maoye was afraid of, had no chance of winning against Noah, who could finish off Maoye in one blow. This was something that could be imagined even if one used their knees to think. As expected, Lily bit her lip and whispered, even if it's Maoye, it's impossible for her to be a match for this male elf user. Lady Red Lotus was right. Hearing Lily's words clearly, Noah narrowed his eyes. In other words, you're planning to lure me out even though you know that you can't defeat me? That's right. Lily tried her best to speak while facing Noah's gaze. Since you can fight evenly with Lady Red Lotus in a short battle, then you're not someone that Maoye and I can handle. That's what Lady Red Lotus told me. If that was the case, then it was a little thought-provoking. Why did Lily want to lure Noah out when she knew that she couldn't defeat Noah? Maoye was just a child who didn't even have a concept of good and evil. It wasn't strange for her to blindly find Noah. However, Lily seemed to be very mature and wouldn't do such an unwise thing. In the end, Lily still did it. Under such circumstances, Noah could only think of one reason. So that's how it is, Noah muttered to himself. That Lady Red Lotus told you to find me, right? Lily's eyes trembled, and even her expression changed. Obviously Noah was right. Speak. Noah asked straightforwardly. Why did Lady Red Lotus ask you to find me? Lily fell silent. After a while, Lily looked up at Noah and said, Don't worry, Mr. Noah. Lady Red Lotus wants to see you. Noah raised an eyebrow and smiled. In other words, you're just here to lead the way? Yes. Lily had a bitter look on her face. This is the task that Lady Red Lotus entrusted to me. Noah fell silent as if he was thinking about something. He tossed the magic stone in his hand up and down, which made Lily's heart skip a beat. Soon Noah nodded. I understand. Tell me where Lady Red Lotus is and I'll go there myself. Go there yourself. Lily was stunned. I've seen the map of this abandoned city in the library of the Holy Region. Just tell me the location. Noah glanced at Lily. Then you can leave. With that, Lily's fate was decided. Lily opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something. However, Noah's half-smile made Lily swallow her words. Perhaps, Lily didn't expect Noah to be so domineering that he disrupted Lady Red Lotus's plan for her. But who asked Lily to attack Claire, Viviana, and Alice? Therefore, Noah had no reason to keep this girl from the Elfie clan. Understanding this, Lily could only nod her head. Wong. A minute later, a magic array for teleportation appeared on the ground below Lily, and she disappeared just like Maoye. Only then did the group of girls realize what happened. Noah walked in front of them and suddenly said, Lady Red Lotus, I'll meet up with Lady Red Lotus. I'm going to meet that Red Lotus. The four of you will act together as per the plan we set out earlier. The group of girls was stunned. In the end, it was Claire who understood Noah's intentions beforehand. You want to meet Lady Red Lotus alone? Claire frowned. Isn't that too risky? Yeah, Alice agreed. That might be a trap. I think so too, Viviana said quickly. It's better if you don't go. Even if we're going, we should go together. Linley looked straight at Noah. There's no reason for you to go alone. The group of girls' concerns weren't wrong. Lady Red Lotus, who didn't have any interaction with Noah, suddenly sent Lily to find him and didn't hesitate to use Noah's team members to lure him out. No matter how they thought about it, it couldn't be that she just wanted to duel with Noah. If it was Leola, it would be possible. But if it was Lady Red Lotus, no one would believe that dangerous person would go through so much trouble just for a duel. Since that was the case, they could only think of a banquet at Hongmen. No one would want to be like Xiang Yu, who knew that it was a banquet at Hongmen but still happily participated. Unfortunately, Noah wasn't one of them. You don't have to worry about me. I know what I'm doing. Noah smiled slightly. It just so happens that I have some things I want to verify with Lady Red Lotus. It might not be a bad thing to go. Claire, Linley, Viviana, and Alice looked at each other and opened their mouths in unison. However, before the group of girls had a chance to speak, Noah said, You don't have to come with me. Not only would that be a waste of time, but if it really is a trap, I can still escape unscathed. If you guys come, then it might not be so. The girls were immediately speechless. After all, Noah's strength was something that was obvious to all. Even Mao Ya, who was comparable to an ace player, was cleanly defeated by Noah. If Noah really wanted to escape, the girls believed that even Lady Redisubble wouldn't be able to stop him. If the girls were to follow him, they might really make Noah cower in fear and be unable to unleash his full potential. Since that was the case, the best way was undoubtedly to follow the plan they had agreed on before and act separately. If the four of you are together, other than Lady Redisubble, even an ace player won't be able to do anything to you, Noah said. So leave Lady Red Lotus to me. The girls were silent for a while. In the end, they could only nod helplessly. Noah smiled slightly and raised his head to look at the sky. In the air, the atmosphere before a storm began to spread. Chapter 18:10. With the passage of time, the moonlit night gradually turned darker and darker. In the abandoned city, a large number of magical fairies were still active, making the ancient city seem livelier than it was during the day. Vaguely, the elven messengers hiding in the corners of the abandoned city could even hear roars full of resentment, which made them feel terrified. Those roars were either the cries of violent magical fairies, or the cries of undead crippled elves. In such a city, the elven envoys from the Ordesian Empire, the Alpha Theocracy, the Holy Tuya Kingdom, and the Draconic Duchy of Draconia were still playing games with each other, performing a wonderful elven sword dance. Gradually, the gloomy and lively atmosphere in the abandoned city began to fade. The magical fairies began to conceal themselves. The crippled elves gradually disappeared on the spot. The sky gradually regained its light, and dawn had already arrived. However, even though dawn had arrived, the sky was still overcast, as if it was a gloomy day. It seemed a little lifeless. Although at a time like this, even if there's good weather, I won't be happy. With such a feeling, Noah walked on the vast but somewhat dilapidated street without stopping. Noah's destination was the center of the abandoned city. There was a very grand sacred hall there. It was said that in the past, before the abandoned city was baptized by the Elven War, the elves who built this city used to worship the Elven King. Now, after thousands of years, the Elven War had turned this city into ruins, but the sacred hall was barely preserved. Could be considered a miracle. Of course, after so many years, the sacred hall had already become a place of historical interest. However, the most mysterious elven messengers of the Elven Sword Dance Festival were there, waiting for Noah's arrival. Whoosh! The gloomy and cold wind blew across the entire street, stirring up a cloud of dust and making the vision a little hazy. After 10 minutes, Noah finally arrived in front of the sacred hall, braving the cold wind. Without any hesitation, Noah reached out his hand and forcefully pushed open the door of the sacred hall. Clack! With a heavy rusty sound, the door that was 2 or 3 times taller than Noah opened with difficulty. Walking into the sacred hall, Noah was presented with an extremely vast hall. In the center of the hall, a girl wearing a military uniform of the Alphys Empire and a ghost-like mask on her face had her back facing Noah. She was like a statue, not moving at all. Looking at that figure, Noah stopped in his tracks. It was only then that Red Lotus seemed to wake up from her nap and raised her head. Are they here? If Lotus' voice was as elegant as a breeze, then Red Lotus' voice was as cold and heavy as a king's. Only those who had seen true despair and hell could make such a sound. Noah did not know what kind of despair and hell Red Lotus had seen. However, at least in Noah's memory, this person had brought unimaginable hell and despair to others. Thus, Noah said faintly, "Should I continue to call you Red Lotus? Or should I call you by your real name?" With just one sentence, the already heavy atmosphere seemed to have been filled with lead, to the point where it was difficult to even breathe. Red Lotus turned around and looked at Noah. Her voice seemed even colder than before. "So that's how it is. Have you noticed my real identity? Because Lotus once told me that you seem to have some relationship with Claire and Phaena." Noah continued as if he did not feel the coldness in Red Lotus' voice. However, ever since the Fire Elf King unleashed a great fire on the entire Olesia Empire 4 years ago in a fit of rage, the Elstian family that Claire belonged to was stripped of their noble title. Both her parents were imprisoned, and only Claire remained in the Olesia Elven Academy. However, because she was the younger sister of the Elf Princess of Calamity, Everyone looked at her coldly and no longer made friends with her. Therefore, if you are related to Claire, you must have known each other 4 years ago. As for Fayanna, she was called the Lost Elf Concubine because she lost her contract with an elf. That was also 4 years ago, Noah said. After that, Fayanna's treatment was almost the same as Claire's. If you are related to Fayanna, then it could only be 4 years ago. Since you are related to Claire and Fayanna before their downfall and at such a special time 4 years ago, I believe that no matter who it is, they will first think of one person. Noah glanced at Red Lotus. That is the elf concubine of Calamity who betrayed the Fire Elf King 4 years ago, and stole the most powerful flame elf from the Fire Elf King's temple, causing the entire Alphys Empire to suffer a calamity. Red Lotus fell silent. However, the atmosphere around her began to change, making the air even heavier. Noah looked at Red Lotus, who remained silent, and continued with a smile. In addition to Lotus, before the start of the Elven Sword Dance Festival, Losti also told me that among the Purgatory Apostles, there was another person as terrifying as Lotus. Moreover, this person seemed to have formed a contract with a mythical elf. This was undoubtedly another hint. Because of this, before the start of the finals, I even hid in the library of the Holy Realm and thoroughly searched for information. In the end, I confirmed one thing. Noah looked straight at Red Lotus. 4 years ago, the elf concubine of Calamity took away the most powerful flame elf from the Fire Elf King's temple. It was a mythical elf that was defeated by the 5 elf kings in the Elven War, and was sealed in the Fire Elf King's temple. You have a deep relationship with Claire and Viviana, who didn't lose everything 4 years ago. You also have a mythical elf that won't enter the human world, and form a contract with humans. In addition, your aura is so scorching. It's obvious that your elf attribute is the fire attribute. With so many hints, can't we confirm your true identity? Noah's voice echoed clearly in the entire space. The elf concubine of Calamity, Rubia Elstian. As soon as she finished speaking, boom! In the sound of an explosion, an extremely terrifying flame burned fiercely on Red Lotus' body, and turned into a wave of fire that violently surged in all directions. Suddenly, the entire holy church seemed to be burning and turned into a sea of fire. The heat in the air rose to an extremely terrifying level. The billowing heatwave was already comparable to Naz, who had once used the power of Fire Dragon King Agnir. In the center of this sea of fire, Red Lotus' waist-length black hair bathed in flames began to burn. The flames didn't burn Honglian's hair. Instead, Honglian's waist-length hair gradually turned a fiery red from top to bottom as the flames continued to burn. That hair color was exactly the same as Claire's. Then, Honglian's cold voice rang out. I didn't expect that in addition to strength, you also have such a degree of wisdom. Saying this, Red Lotus reached out and took off the mask on her face. It was a pretty face that was breathtakingly beautiful. It was somewhat similar to Claire's appearance, but more mature, adding a bit of charm out of nowhere. However, on that face there was a coldness that Claire didn't have. Red Lotus, who no longer hid her appearance, threw the mask in her hand. Her waist-length fiery red hair rose and fell with the rolling waves of fire. A pair of ruby-like eyes stared straight at Noah. As expected, your ability is as outstanding as Liana Subble said. It even exceeded my expectations. How interesting. Red Lotus said. No, her name wasn't Red Lotus. She was Claire's biological sister and Frianna's senior in the Gods' Parliament. She had interacted with both Claire and Frianna like sisters. Rubia Elstian, the elf concubine of Calamity. That was the girl's true identity. Claire definitely didn't expect it, right? The person she wanted to meet at the Elven Sword Dance Festival had already appeared on the same stage as her. Chapter 1811. The flames of the Red Lotus were still burning in the spacious hall, causing the heat waves to reverberate in the air like invisible waves. At this moment, Rubia Elstian was like the master of the flames. She was bathed in the sea of flames of the Red Lotus. Her gaze was as sharp as a blade as it fell on Noah's body. Facing Rubia's sharp gaze and feeling the shocking heat emitted by the sea of flames, Noah knew that the Elf of Calamity didn't make such a big commotion for show. Instead, she wanted to disperse the wandering spirits of the divine ceremonial court. Otherwise, the spirits of the divine ceremonial court would transmit what was happening here to the great sacrificial hall, and let everyone know the true identity of the Red Lotus. The sudden appearance of the Elf of Calamity and her disguise as she infiltrated the elven sword dance would definitely cause a huge uproar. At that time, the people of the Divine Ceremonial Court and the Ordesian Empire would most likely break into the elven sword dance and capture Rubia. That was why Rubia summoned this sea of flames the moment Noah revealed her true identity. Her purpose was to disperse the surrounding spirits of the Divine Ceremonial Court. Therefore, apart from Noah and Rubia, no one would know what was happening here. However, that was exactly what Noah wanted. After all, what Noah wanted to ask next was not something that should be known by unrelated people. I have a question. Noah met Rubia's sharp gaze and said, "No, to be exact, it should be 2 questions. 2 questions? Rubia's red eyes flickered slightly. I thought you would only ask me why I am here. That is indeed one of the questions. Noah said calmly. Compared to why you are here, the other question is more important to me. Is that so? Rubia said indifferently. It doesn't matter. I have my own reasons for asking you here. Before that, I will listen to your questions. Then please answer me. Noah's gaze was fixed on Rubia. What is your relationship with the Saintess of Salvation, Alicia Edith? Rubia's pair of red eyes suddenly rippled. Don't tell me you have nothing to do with the Saintess of Salvation. Noah stared at Rubia. If you're really interested in me, then you should have investigated me. I believe you know about the relationship between my contracted sprite and the Saintess of Salvation, right? Just as he finished speaking, the elven mark on the back of Noah's hand blossomed with a brilliant light. Within the light, Aster's figure slowly appeared. A pair of mysterious eyes stared at Rubia. I can sense Alicia's aura on you, Aster said, staring at Rubia. Although it's very weak, it's definitely the same aura as Alicia's. I'm sure of it. Hearing this, Rubia glanced at Aster, but her voice did not waver. So that's how it is. Because you felt the aura of the Saintess on me, you thought I was related to her? There's no harm in telling you. Rubia's tone was extremely indifferent. I do have an inextricable relationship with the former Saintess of Salvation. When this sentence came out of Rubia's mouth, Noah could clearly feel Aster's uneasiness. Then, Rubia's next sentence completely messed up Aster's heart. If you want to know why, it's just like how Renasubal inherited the power of the Demon King. I also inherited the power of the Saintess. If Renasubal is the reincarnation of the Demon King, then I am the reincarnation of the Saintess. This sentence shocked Noah. Aster's entire body trembled. His eyes were filled with an intense emotion that had never been seen before. You're lying. Aster's voice trembled. The Demon King can be reincarnated because the original form of the Demon King's power is the power of the Dark Elf King. Before the Dark Elf King disappeared, he reincarnated his power into a human body. That's how the Demon King appeared. Alicia is just an ordinary human. How could she reincarnate her power? Ordinary human, Rubia sarcastically said. If the Saintess of Salvation was really an ordinary human, how could she have the power to annihilate the Demon King? Aster was stunned. What do you mean by that? Noah asked in an interrogative manner. Could it be that the Saintess of Salvation isn't an ordinary human? That's right, Rubia said without hesitation. The Saintess of Salvation isn't an ordinary human. An ordinary human wouldn't be able to fight against the Demon King. Even if this human formed a contract with the Elf King, who was feared by the Elf King, she wouldn't be able to unleash the power of the Elf King. Mythical great elves were known as transcendent existences that couldn't form contracts with humans. After all, the more powerful the elf, the greater the restrictions on its use of power. Ritual elves like the Sage Monarch division couldn't be used without spending a lot of time to summon them. The restrictions on the usage of mythical great elves were even more shocking. It was so great that it exceeded the limits of what humans could bear. Generally speaking, such elves wouldn't be able to form contracts with humans. Under such circumstances, Aster, whose power was even greater than that of a mythical great elf, had to pay the price of forming a contract with him. Not only did he have to pay the price of the contractor's life, but he also had to die from the curse. That kind of consumption, even the elven concubines who are said to have the greatest amount of divine energy and serve the 5 elven kings, can't last more than a few minutes. If you want to unleash the power of the Elf King, You won't even last a moment. Lubia didn't even look at Aster. It was as if she was talking about someone else. If that's the case, how could an ordinary human girl unleash the power of the strongest sword elf without any flaws? How could she annihilate the demon king who inherited the power of the dark elf king? Then what kind of person is Alicia? Aster had lost his cool. If she's not an ordinary human, then what kind of existence is Alicia? The answer is very simple. The Saintess is the same as the demon king. There's another power residing in her body, Lubia said word by word. No one knows that the Saintess's body is a suppressive force that exists to fight against the demon king. That human girl is merely an antibody created by the 5 elven kings to deal with the demon king. What? Noah was shocked. An antibody created by the 5 elven kings? Aster was even more stunned. This kind of performance was impossible to see from Aster in the past. However, Lubia's words really shocked Aster. You're lying. Aster shook his head in disbelief. You're lying. My existence is proof. Lubia looked coldly at Aster and continued without a trace of pity. Just like how the Dark Elf King's power resides in the Demon King's body, the Saintess's body also contains the power of the 5 Elven Kings. When the Demon King appears, the Saintess will awaken. It's because she possesses the power of the 5 Elven Kings that the Saintess can defeat the Demon King, who also possesses the power of the Elven Kings. Therefore, when Lotus inherited the power of the Dark Elf King and became the Demon King, Lubia also inherited the power of the 5 Elven Kings and became the reincarnation of the Saintess. It was because of this that Lubia was able to form a contract with a mythical elf and possess power that was not inferior to Lotus. It's just that I didn't expect the Demon King and the Saintess to be together in this era. It's really ironic. Lubia seemed to have lost interest in continuing her explanation and looked at Noah. What's even more ironic is that other than the Demon King who inherited the power of the Dark Elf King and the Saintess who inherited the power of the 5 Elven Kings, there's actually another Elven envoy who's comparable to the Elven Kings and can perfectly use the Holy Sword. Could it be that your body also possesses someone else's power? After saying this, Lubia shook her head as if she didn't care. Forget it. There'll be plenty of opportunities to investigate this matter in the future. Now I just need to confirm that you're a very precious fighting force. That's enough. Noah Doria, Lubia said in a loud voice. Fight against this world with me. Chapter 18:12. Go against the world? Noah raised his head. Looking at Rubia's cold expression, Noah did not think that the current Saintess was joking. In other words, Rubia was completely serious about going against the world. Could that be Rubia's goal? Did Rubia participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival to go against the world? What was her goal? As if she knew the question in Noah's mind, Rubia spoke directly. The way this world exists is wrong. The 5 Elven Kings control the world and bring blessings to the world. The system that governs the human world and the elemental world is no longer suitable for this world. Therefore, I must put this world on the right track. When she said this, Rubia's tone was more serious than ever. However, Noah still frowned. What does that mean? It's just what it means on the surface. Rubia's eyes flashed with a terrifying light. Everything in this world relies on the power of the Elven Kings to survive. Such a world is undoubtedly wrong. When there is dependence, there will be conflict. No one knows when the Elven Kings who maintain the existence of this world will destroy it. When that time comes, the humans who can only rely on the Elven Kings to survive will be destroyed along with the world. They will not be able to fight back at all. Therefore, we must rise up and fight. Rubia's voice was unprecedentedly loud. For the future of this world, we must pull down the Elven Kings who control the life and death of this world from their pedestal. The shocking speech caused Noah's eyes to suddenly narrow, and a feeling of bewilderment emerged in his heart. Is this why you betrayed the Elven Kings and came to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival? Noah asked with great uncertainty. To take back the control of the world from the Elven Kings? That's right. Rubia spoke decisively. The fate of the world should not be in the hands of the Elven Kings. My goal is to take back the world from the Elven Kings, destroy the Elven Kings, and create a world where elves do not exist. Lubia had finally said something that was not allowed to exist in this world. Destroy the Elven Kings and create a world where elves do not exist. That was Rubia's goal. However, this goal was simply unimaginable. Are you crazy? Noah's brows furrowed deeply. Everything in this world is maintained by the power of the elves. If the power of the elves disappears, don't tell me you don't know what will happen. Just like in the world of fairies' tale, where magic was important to humans, the power of fairies in this world was incomparably important. Without the power of fire, people would not be able to start a fire. Without the power of water, the water source would dry up. Without the power of the earth, the continent would not be able to maintain its stability and would most likely fall apart. Without the power of the wind would disappear from this world and never appear again. And these powers all came from the fairies. To be more precise, it was the Elf King who ruled over the elements of the entire world. Once the Elven King was eliminated, the above calamities would appear. At that time, the elves who relied on the power of the elements to survive would die, and the elven world, which was formed by the elements, might be destroyed. The human world would also usher in unimaginable changes. This kind of thing was too late for people to avoid, but there was actually someone who took the initiative to create it. That was simply a joke. It was too much. However, Lubia was not joking from start to finish. The truth is often the cruelest. You can't understand the helplessness and despair when you learn the cruelest truth, Lubia said in a low voice. Noah Doria, you have the power to know the truth. So come with me. As long as we combine our power, even if our opponents are the gods who rule this world, we can still defeat them. Noah immediately fell silent. Only now did Noah have a feeling. The elf concubine who was known as the Calamity betrayed the Elf King and brought unimaginable disaster to the kingdom of Wuxia. She was hated by countless people. Perhaps she knew a secret that ordinary people could not imagine. That secret caused her to betray the Elf King. Even if she became a sinner of the human race, she would not hesitate. Claire's wish to participate in the elven sword dance was to find out the truth behind Lubia's betrayal of the Elf King. Perhaps that hot-tempered young miss had never believed that her elder sister would actually become a person who committed such a heinous crime. Based on the current situation, Claire's idea might be correct. Behind Lubia's betrayal of the Elf King, there was an unknown truth. Otherwise, as the Saintess, Lubia had no reason to betray the 5 Elf Kings who were the source of her power. Thus Noah spoke. Does Lotus also know about this and plan to act with you? That Demon King does know the truth. Lubia paused for a moment and then said expressionlessly, in a sense we have the same goal, but the methods we use are different. I want to destroy the Elf King and create a world without elves. I want to free the world from the control of the Elf Kings, Lubia said softly. But Lotus Asubble wants to save the Elf King and free the world from the threat of the Mad Elf King. Mad Elf King? Noah's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? You don't need to know now. Lubia looked at Noah. If you want to know the truth, then come with me. Lend me your power and I will tell you everything. The atmosphere in the air suddenly became extremely uncomfortable. Noah's eyebrows furrowed deeper and deeper. He really felt that he had fallen into a huge whirlpool. And that whirlpool was almost completely connected to the life and death of this world. Just as Noah was deep in thought, a slender little hand was stuffed into his palm. Master! Aster raised his head and looked at Noah. His eyes were filled with uneasiness that had never been seen before. It was not the uneasiness that came from knowing the relationship between Lubia and the Saintess of Salvation. It was the uneasiness of not being able to continue accompanying Noah. If Lubia's goal was to create a world without elves, then Aster would not be allowed to exist. If Noah agreed to act with Lubia, it meant that Noah would give up on Aster. Aster was still uneasy about this. Seeing Aster like this, Noah's heart calmed down. He reached out his hand and patted Aster's head to comfort him. At the same time, he turned his gaze to Lubia. However, in the next second, Noah and Lubia's expression froze. They turned their heads and looked at the entrance of the hall. There, a girl wearing an exotic costume that looked like a witch's costume, and holding a pitch-black magic sword walked in with powerful footsteps. She ignored the burning flames around her and slowly walked in. Tsk. Lubia was speechless. You really came, Demon King. The one who came was Ren Asubble. Because I know that you will not let go of any cards that can be used to achieve your goal. Ren stepped on the flames and walked in step by step. A power that can fight against the Elven King is too important for you, who wants to destroy the Elven King. That's why you did not hesitate to let me, who has different expectations from you, to join you. You will not let such an excellent combatant like Noah Dole slip away before your eyes. You will definitely meet him. So you have been spying on me all this time? Lubia said sarcastically. As expected of the Demon King. Didn't you also ask Lily to spy on me? Ren's face was calm. We are in the same boat, Saintess. Obviously, just like what Lubia said, Ren knew everything. Ren is subtle. Noah looked at Ren and said, "What do you know?" "What do I know? That's something I need to worry about in the future." Lotus turned her gaze to Noah, a strong will surging in her eyes. "Before that, let's settle the matter between us." Dense darkness surged from Ren's body like a storm. Chapter 18:13. Wang. Amidst the buzzing sound, the thick darkness that surged from Lotus' body turned into a frenzied airflow and poured into her body. At this moment, Lotus converted all the dark elemental energy under her control into divine aura, causing the phosphorescent light source to fluctuate from her body and turn into a gust of wind that swept in all directions. Holding the Vorpal sword in her hand, Lotus walked slowly toward Noah while emitting dense darkness and phosphorescent light. She did not even turn her head back as she spoke to Lubia. "According to our previous agreement, I can act with you, but when I fight Noah, you can't interfere. You haven't forgotten, right?" Lubia did not answer. Instead, after a moment of silence, she turned around and walked toward the burning sea of fire and gradually disappeared. Noah could feel that Lubia did not leave. However, just as Lotus said, Lubia clearly did not intend to interfere in the battle between Noah and Lotus. Noah took a deep breath and curled his lips into a smile as he looked at Lotus, who was slowly walking toward him. Her entire body was surging with an astonishing amount of divine power and dense darkness. "You really know how to pick the right time. I have a lot of questions waiting to be answered." "I know. That's why I have to fight you before you know the truth," Lotus said softly. "After all, when you know the truth, you may not have the strength to fight me." The reverse was the same. If Lotus did not solve the problem with Noah first, she would not have the strength to fulfill her wish. In that case, before that, the only choice was to fight Noah first. No matter the final outcome, one of us will bear all the burdens. Lotus pointed the demonic sword in her hand at Noah. "So let's fight here." Noah stared at Lotus. When he saw the clear determination in her eyes, he immediately understood what was going on. Today, if victory and defeat were not determined, Lotus would absolutely not give up. Understanding this, Noah took a deep breath and suppressed the many doubts in his heart. He turned his head and looked at Aster. "Aster, can you do it?" Her former master was not an ordinary human. Instead, it was created by the 5 Elven Kings to suppress the Demon King. Moreover, the power of the Saintess that originated from the 5 Elven Kings had now been inherited by Lubia, making her the Saintess of this generation. Noah did not know how much this matter affected Aster. Hence, if Aster couldn't fight, Noah wouldn't force her to. Aster naturally understood what Noah meant, but she still spoke without hesitation. "I am Master Sword. There's no reason why I can't." Hearing Aster's words, Noah nodded. "Then I'll leave it to you, Aster." "Yes." Aster's is answered. Just like that, the two of them held each other's hands and gradually closed their eyes. In the next moment, Noah used the Elven language to chant the contract. "Cold Steel Queen, Demon Slaying Holy Sword, turn into a steel sword and bestow me with divine power." A brilliant white light flashed from Aster's body, causing her body to turn into light particles and gather in Noah's hand. The elven magic device named Demon Slayer was tightly held in Noah's hand. The blade shone with a silver luster. Feeling the warmth from the Demon Slayer in his hand, Noah opened his eyes and looked in the direction of Lotus. 2 pairs of eyes met in midair, causing the atmosphere in the air to change abruptly. Swoosh! Without any warning, Lotus turned into a shadow and rushed towards Noah's direction. The dense darkness around Lotus' body suddenly poured into the Vorpal sword, causing the pitch-black demonic sword to emit an ominous black light. Just like that, Lotus grabbed the demonic sword that seemed to carry all the darkness in the world. As the demonic sword flickered with an ominous black light, she raised her hand and fiercely stabbed at Noah's chest. She clearly did not use the initial form of the absolute sword technique that could release a lightning-like sudden thrust. However, Lotus' simple thrust caused the demon sword to transform into a black light. Under the sharp sound of breaking air, it flashed through the air and directly pierced out. Noah's gaze sharpened. Without any hesitation, he raised the holy sword in his hand and suddenly raised it. Ding! Amidst a crisp sound, the sharp thrust that was like a flash of black light was suddenly deflected by the holy sword that was raised upwards. However, in the next moment, the demon sword that was repelled suddenly turned into a pitch-black lightning with an ominous black light. Absolute sword technique. Initial form purple lightning. The initial form of the absolute sword technique that was not used at the beginning was actually used by Lotus at this time. Thus, the demon sword that had turned into an ominous black light suddenly stabbed towards Noah's chest with a speed that was more than 100 times faster than before. Noah's heart was fiercely shaken, and he suddenly saw the light. Lotus knew that if she had used the purple lightning at the beginning, she would not have been able to do anything to Noah. Therefore, the strongest sword dancer deliberately rushed forward at the beginning, in order to resolutely launch the purple lightning, at the moment Noah's attack was repelled. With such a fast attack at such a close distance, even Noah almost could not react in time. After he reacted, Noah, in an extremely short moment that was almost impossible to complete, swung his sword and blocked the holy sword in front of him. Ding! Another crisp sound reverberated in the air. The demon sword that had violently pierced the holy sword in front of it burst forth with an extremely powerful force, heavily impacting it. Noah only felt his sword-wielding arm go numb, and his whole body was unexpectedly sent flying by the sudden attack. The soles of his feet rubbed against the ground, and he slid all the way back. In just a moment, Lotus's physical strength was so strong that she was able to repel Noah with one sword strike. However, that was to be expected. The absolute sword technique's sword dance consumed a large amount of divine might when used, and was used to temporarily strengthen the body. Therefore, until the end of using the absolute sword technique, the user's physical strength would be greatly improved. Using divine might to complement the sword technique, and then using divine might to strengthen the body, to reach a transcendent realm. That was the mystery of the absolute sword technique. Because of this, before he lost his authority and ability value, and when his strength reached the peak, enough to be a tyrant in the box, Noah would also use the absolute sword technique. After all, the greater the divine might, the greater the power of the absolute sword technique. Moreover, the absolute sword technique's potential was very high, and when used by Noah it was definitely enough to kill a god. Of course, after using the power of the Dark Elf King, Lotus, who also had an endless amount of divine might in her hands, and had the title of the strongest sword dancer, the absolute sword technique also became a terrifying technique. However, the hastily erected defense was easily disintegrated, and Noah was directly sent flying. At the same time, Lotus, who had sent Noah flying with a purple lightning, jumped high into the air, and her body surged with an even more dense divine might. Absolute sword technique. Form 2 meteor. Suddenly, Lotus, who had leaped into the air, turned into a meteor falling from the sky, and swooped down like a thunderbolt, rubbing against the atmosphere, and heavily slashing the elven device in her hands at the sliding Noah. Meteor was a derivative of purple lightning. In other words, the second form of the absolute sword technique also had a speed comparable to lightning. In addition, the divine might used was even greater, and with the advantage of falling from the sky, the power and speed of this attack was more than one level higher than purple lightning. However, unlike the first form of purple lightning, the second form of meteor had a way to deal with it. At least for Noah, who had also mastered the absolute sword technique, that was the case. Clang! A large amount of divine might surged out from Noah's body, and flowed into the holy sword in his hands, causing the silver holy sword to emit a dazzling light. Absolute sword technique. Form 7 biting dragon. The divine might that was poured into the holy sword turned into a spiral of energy, and covered the entire sword body. Immediately, the silver holy sword that carried the spiral of energy flashed like lightning, and welcomed the demon sword that was falling like a meteor. Chapter 18:14. Absolute sword technique. Form 2 meteor. Absolute sword technique. Form 7 dragon bite. The demon sword flashing with an unknown black light, and the holy sword blooming with a dazzling white light flashed like lightning. On one side was a slash with an astonishing force like a meteor falling from the sky. On the other side was a sword technique with a spiral-like strength like a dragon soaring into the sky. The pitch-black demon sword and the silver holy sword both set off a frenzied airflow, fiercely colliding with each other. Clang! Steel collided with steel, and the sound of metal colliding turned into a violent gust of wind. It was as if an explosion had set off a shockwave, shaking in all directions. Pung! The ground at the center of the impact force collapsed like an avalanche, exploding in an instant. Kacha kacha kacha! Cracks like a spider web spread around the collapsed ground. The astonishing strength was like a typhoon, blowing in all directions, and extinguishing most of the burning sea of fire. The ceiling began to tremble, scattering dust, as if it could collapse at any time. Under such a collision, Noah and Lotus both flew out from the center of the avalanche-like impact, trying to adjust their bodies. After landing on the ground, the soles of their feet rubbed against the ground, and at the same time the ground cracked. They couldn't stop retreating. In just a moment the distance between the two was pulled apart by more than a few hundred meters. If it wasn't for the fact that the main hall of the sacred hall was really vast, it was afraid that the battle between Noah and Lotus would have already destroyed the building. But even so, the astonishing collision still turned into substantial damage, making the entire main hall of the sacred hall as if it was hit by a typhoon, and couldn't stop shaking. Under such circumstances, Noah used the strength of his feet, and at the same time the ground was crushed, he finally stabilized his body with difficulty. And Noah's hand holding the sword had already begun to tremble. Feeling the numbness and pain in his hand, Noah was really surprised. Undoubtedly, I've already used the dragon bite that's specifically used against the air, but there's still this level of power that can be used on me? Meteor was an airborne technique. Bite the dragon was an aerial attack. In terms of effect, Noah, who had used the absolute sword skill, should have the upper hand without a doubt. In the end, Lotus's meteor still managed to affect Noah to this extent. One could well imagine how much divine might Lotus had used in that attack. Is this the power of the Dark Elf King? While Noah was still in shock, an air-breaking sound that was hidden in the impact wind that had not yet subsided faintly entered Noah's ears. Noah quickly raised his head and looked ahead. Huff! Lien shouted and once again rushed over explosively. The demon sword in her hand was surging with black gas. It brought with it an intense darkness as it suddenly flashed past. Swish, swish, swish. In an instant the sword light split apart, stirring up 3 strong winds that almost overlapped with each other as they flashed out. 3 pitch-black sword shadows cut through the sky like 3 flashes of light, fiercely sweeping towards Noah's direction. Noah was really surprised, because in this short period of time Lotus had used the purple lightning absolute sword skill 3 times in a row. The 3 pitch-black sword flashes directly turned into extremely fast thrusts, almost simultaneously stabbing towards Noah. Those thrusts already faintly had the essence of Sasaki Kojiro's swallow return that Noah had seen in the world of Type Moon. In other words, those 3 consecutive purple lightning strikes at lightning speed impressively had a trace of the realm of magic. Since Lotus was able to use the absolute sword skill to this realm, it was really beyond Noah's expectations. Noah couldn't help but be surprised. At this critical moment, Noah suddenly gathered all the divine might under his feet, releasing it in one breath. Stepping on the explosive pressure, he retreated like a cannonball. Chi! Those 3 flashes of thrusts, 2 of them brushed past Noah's ribs and side abdomen, directly landing in the air. However, the 3rd thrust solidly fell on Noah's shoulder. Poochie! In the tearing sound, the thrusts pierced Noah's shoulder, allowing the pitch-black magic sword to sink into Noah's body. That pain directly turned into a mental impact, causing Noah's mind to be temporarily blank. However, at the same time, Noah's body began to heat up. Although he left his authority in the space between worlds to sublimate, Noah's constitution as a god-slayer still existed. And the god-slayer not only had the ability to resist curses, but also had the ability to stimulate power hundreds of times stronger than adrenaline when entering the battle state, allowing the god-slayer to fight beyond his limit. With this kind of constitution, once the god-slayer entered the battle state, no matter how bad the situation was, he would be able to unleash 100% of his combat power, and become more and more courageous as he fought. Lotus's amazing sword dance skill had finally stimulated Noah's fighting spirit, and his body fully entered the battle state. Wong! Suddenly, a violent divine might energy surged out from Noah's body, and then poured into the holy sword in his hand, causing the body of the holy sword to ripple like phosphorescent light. Ultimate sword skill. Form 6 Shattered Fang. The ultimate sword skill that existed only to destroy the opponent's weapon was released in Noah's hand, causing the silver holy sword to turn into a heavy warhammer, and heavily slash down at the pitch-black magic sword that had sunk into his shoulder. Lotus's expression immediately changed. With the divine might energy that Noah poured into the holy sword like a torrent, Lotus had reason to believe. This ultimate sword skill that specialized in destroying the opponent's weapon was definitely enough to shatter her elven device. Lotus immediately gritted her teeth and poured a large amount of divine might energy into her elven device. Death announcing dark thunder. The pitch-black magic sword that had sunk into Noah's shoulder suddenly burst into a violent electric light. Beep beep beep. The pitch-black lightning burst out from the pitch-black magic sword and turned into a black lightning strike, covering Noah's entire body. Dong! With Noah and Lotus as the center, the ground was suddenly blasted apart by the black lightning. Countless gravel and debris were stirred up by the shockwave and shot out in all directions like bullets fired from a gun. If there was someone who understood the strongest sword dancer here, they would definitely be able to recognize this lightning strike. It was a long-range attack that Lotus Asubble often used during the Elven Sword Dance Festival 3 years ago. Death announcing dark thunder. After pouring divine might into the magic sword, after the magic sword had transformed it into a dark element lightning strike, and then released it. It was a magic sword skill that belonged to the strongest sword dancer, and could only be released with the help of the magic sword. It was a pity that the nature of this magic sword skill was too close to elven magic. Therefore, in the midst of the lightning strike that was enough to blow up the surrounding area, Noah, who had an incant-like resistance to spells, directly ignored the crazy lightning strike, and the holy sword in his hand, which also had an amazing anti-magic effect, suddenly slashed down. Poochie! The pitch-black lightning was cleanly split by the silver holy sword. What? Lotus was shocked. At this time the silver holy sword with a dazzling light had already cut through the pitch-black lightning, and fell on the magic sword that had sunk into Noah's shoulder. Clang! Along with the sound of a halberd, the silver holy sword carried an extremely dazzling light, cutting the pitch-black demon sword in half. Bang! The fragments of the pitch-black magic sword exploded in the air like sparks. The most powerful Dark Elf's magic equipment, the legendary most powerful sword dancer's magic sword, finally shattered under the slash of the most powerful sword elf, under the power of the most powerful sword elf's ultimate sword skill that specialized in destroying weapons. Lysia! Lotus cried out in alarm. Immediately afterward, the silver holy sword rose up and pierced toward Lotus's direction. Ultimate sword skill. Primary form purple lightning. The lightning-fast sword directly pierced through like a beam of light and landed heavily on Lotus's abdomen. Bang! Amidst the muffled sound, Lotus was sent flying like a rubber ball. Her entire body trembled as she was sent flying. After crashing into the ground, she continued to slide for a distance before finally coming to a stop. Chapter 18:15. The whole place suddenly went silent. With a poochie sound, Noah pulled out the shard of the black magic sword that was still in his shoulder and threw it on the ground, making a clang sound. Huff! The pain from his shoulder made Noah gasp for breath. Then he raised his eyes and looked forward. Ugh! Lotus covered her abdomen, feeling the pain from above. Her delicate face was dripping with sweat. It was easy to imagine how much damage the two of them had suffered. This was the result of Noah and Lotus not materializing their elven devices and turning all the damage into mental attacks. If they had materialized their elven devices and turned them into real weapons, then there would have been a wound on their bodies, right? But even if that was the case, it didn't mean that the battle was over. Resisting the pain from her abdomen, Lotus struggled to get up from the ground, turned her eyes to Noah, met Noah's gaze and raised one of her hands. Clang! A dazzling pitch-black light suddenly shone from the back of Lotus's raised hand, and an elven mark suddenly appeared. The elven mark burst out with black lightning. Amidst the pitch-black lightning, the pitch-black devil sword took shape once again. Lotus held it tightly in her hand, and the sword emitted an ominous light. Looking at this scene, Noah secretly said in his heart, "Sure enough, it's not that simple." The elven device wasn't an ordinary weapon, but a tool created by the elves themselves. In other words, as long as the contracted elves weren't destroyed, and the elven user's divine power wasn't exhausted, then even if the elven device was destroyed, it could be summoned again. Of course, if the elven device was destroyed, then the contracted elves would consume a lot of energy. If the elves themselves were exhausted, then it was very likely that they would directly disappear. Obviously, as the highest-ranking dark elf, Celestia still had energy left. Therefore, Lotus once again materialized the Vorpal sword, pointed it at Noah and said, "You're much stronger than I thought." Hearing this, Noah laughed bitterly. Same here. Only at this moment did Noah understand why Lotus was called the strongest sword dancer by others. This young girl's attainments in swordsmanship had already reached an astonishing level. Just like Sasaki Kojiro's swallow return, she was able to use the purple lightning 3 times in a row at the same time. Noah could only avoid the first 2 strikes, but the third strike was impossible to avoid, and he was directly stabbed. From this, it could be seen how superb Ren's sword skills were. At the very least, Lotus's performance had reached a point where even Noah could not help but be surprised. In Noah's opinion, among all the people he had met so far, the one with the highest attainments in swordsmanship was undoubtedly Tony, who had usurped the authority of the god of swords. That battle maniac may be stupid, but the amount of effort he put into his sword skills was not just a little bit. It was to the extent that he could even cut a drop of rain in half. He had comprehended the mind's eye and the mind's sword of tranquility, reaching the realm where no move beats a move. Even Luo Hao, who was said to be unparalleled in martial arts in China, claimed that in terms of swordsmanship alone, Tony was not below her, and was enough to stand at the top of the world. This was enough to prove everything. Therefore, of course, Tony's swordsmanship had always occupied the highest position in Noah's heart. However, now, this ranking would probably have to be slightly changed. In terms of swordsmanship alone, Lotus's swordsmanship was not below Tony's. Not to mention, the absolute sword skill was not a simple swordsmanship, but a swordsmanship combined with the energy of Kamui. The stronger the Kamui used, the stronger the power, and it could also strengthen the body while using it. In terms of swordsmanship, even Tony would have to kneel in front of Lotus, right? In this way, how could Noah not be surprised? However, this was far from the end. At least, as an elf envoy who came from the same sect, Noah knew that Lotus still had a trump card that she had not used yet. Thinking of this, Noah clenched the demon slayer and looked at Lotus with flickering eyes. It's time to determine the winner, right? This sentence also made Lotus's eyes flicker. After a while, Lotus's eyes became sharp and she said, "That's right, since my demon sword skill is ineffective against you, and the swordsmanship comes from the same sect as yours, it's not a good idea to continue like this. It's indeed time to determine the winner." Saying this, Lotus slowly poured Kamui energy into the demon sword in her hand, stared at Noah and said, "So, you should know what my biggest trump card is, right?" Lotus's words made Noah whisper, "Ardent Flower Spiral Sword Dance. Ardent Flower Spiral Sword Dance." It was the 9th form of the ultimate sword dance technique, also known as form break. It was the most powerful technique among the ultimate sword techniques. After all, it was not a sword technique that was developed to deal with elf envoys, but a destructive sword technique used to defeat large elves. That sword technique could not only strengthen the elf envoy's body to the extreme, but it could also be used to suppress demon god envoys. It was because of this sword technique that Grey Vath was known as the strongest elf envoy in the continent. In the past, she had single-handedly suppressed a small country and killed a demon god envoys, becoming a legend. Of course, such a sword technique, in the hands of Lotus, who had the power of the Dark Elf Queen, could kill a mythical-level elf or even the Elf King in one hit, let alone a demon god envoys. Therefore, that was undoubtedly Lotus' trump card. That was originally a two-blade sword technique, but you and I can use an elf device to recreate it. Lotus stared straight at Noah. So, I will pour everything I have into the next move, and use this move to determine the winner. After saying that, Lotus took a step forward and tightly held the hilt of her sword with both hands. The tip of the sword drooped down, and her eyes bloomed with unprecedented awe. An extremely dense darkness appeared out of nowhere in the space around Lotus, and like streams of dark air, It poured into Lotus' body, turning into endless divine power, and poured into the demon sword in her hand. An intense pitch-black light immediately blossomed from the demonic sword. At this moment, Noah's body suddenly tensed up. Immediately, Lotus' body suddenly burst out, like a gust of wind, and rushed in front of Noah. The divine power gathered on the demon sword skyrocketing. Ultimate sword dance. Form breaker ardent flower spiral sword dance 36 consecutive slashes. The pitch-black demonic sword turned into streaks of swordlight that gushed out like a storm, enveloping Noah's location. Noah seemed to have been pulled into a world of swords, with sword light flashing from all directions. In just a moment, the storm-like continuous sword dance bloomed in front of Noah. Therefore Noah understood. This move was the real demon sword. Compared to the ardent flower spiral sword dance used by Lotus, Sasaki Kojiro's swallow return could only admit defeat. Because Sasaki Kojiro's swallow return could only make 3 slashes at the same time. But Lotus at this moment made a total of 36 slashes. So amazing! Unfortunately, Lotus did not know. Although the form breaker ardent flower spiral sword dance was the most powerful move in the ultimate sword dance, it was not the strongest move. Lotus did not learn the true meaning of the ultimate sword dance. Noah, on the other hand, had learned. When he obtained the qualification to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival, Gray, who developed the ultimate sword dance, taught him personally. Wong! The terrifying divine power rose from Noah's body, turning into a burning flame, and rushed into the air. Clang! Following a crisp clang, the silver holy sword transformed into a streak of light that abruptly slashed through the air, repelling the torrential storm of swords. Then the enormous divine power that was poured into the demonic sword by Lotus to release the ardent spiraling sword dance was forcefully pulled onto the silver holy sword by an invisible force, causing the silver holy sword to suddenly flash with a shocking white light. Ultimate sword dance. Ultimate form heaven's ultimate flash. The shocking white light turned into a cold flash, and when Lotus's pupils shrunk to the size of a needle, it pierced through the sky and directly penetrated Lotus' body. Chapter 1816. Poochie. The sound of the sharp blade piercing through the body could be clearly heard. The demon slayer, which had turned into a flash of light, pierced into Lotus' chest without any suspense. It then exited from Lotus' back with a dazzling radiance that could pierce through one's eyes. The unimaginable damage turned into a mental attack, causing Lotus's body to tremble violently. Her mind was in a mess, as if it had been turned upside down. Under such an impact, the vorpal sword in Lotus's hand slowly slid to the ground. Clang! With a crisp sound, the pitch-black demon sword knocked on the ground and fell there. Cough? Lotus violently coughed, coughing out a trace of blood, causing the corners of her mouth to be stained with blood. The ultimate secret of the absolute sword skill, the most powerful counterattack skill called the ultimate heaven flash, caused a great deal of damage. Under the condition of being transformed into a mental attack, Lotus's lungs constricted due to the severe concussion, squeezing out blood. Such a terrifying attack caused Lotus' body to tremble, and she gradually fell to the ground. Her consciousness had already begun to blur. Her body had completely lost its strength. Lotus could only force herself to maintain the last trace of consciousness, and try her best to raise her head and look forward. There, Noah was holding the silver holy sword, and was also violently gasping for breath. Of course, Noah was not tired. Ever since he obtained the third perpetual motion machine, Noah's physical strength had become endless, and his body would not feel tired at all. The reason why Noah was violently gasping for breath was completely because of the pain that came from every corner of his body. Don't forget, although the absolute sword skill had endless uses, it also had a side effect. After using it, it would cause a huge burden on the body. In the past, Noah relied on the ability points to ignore the burden of using the absolute sword skill. Now, without the ability points, it was naturally impossible to ignore the burden of the absolute sword skill on the body. However, different absolute sword skills cause different burdens on the body. For example, before the absolute sword skill was broken, Noah relied on the body that he had trained for the past few years to use it without any scruples, but if he used the absolute sword skill, then there was no way to not bear the burden of the absolute sword skill. And the absolute sword skill's ultimate form caused more burdens on the body than the absolute sword skill. After using the absolute sword skill's ultimate form, although Noah's body was not to the point where he could not move, there was pain all over his body, causing him to involuntarily start to frown and gasp for breath. Looking at Noah in this state, Lotus squeezed out a voice with difficulty. What is that?" Hearing this, Noah heard while panting. He lowered his eyes and looked at Lotus, who was in front of him. After a moment of silence, he spoke. "That is the ultimate profound meaning of the absolute sword skill. Ultimate heavenly flash." "Profound?" Lotus said in disbelief. "Isn't the ultimate form of the absolute sword skill ardent flower spiral sword dance?" "At first I thought so too, until later Grey Vase told me that the ultimate form of the absolute sword skill is not the ultimate destructive sword skill like ardent flower spiral sword dance, but a counterattack skill that will definitely kill." Noah stared at Lotus and said, "To be able to completely absorb the power of the opponent's move, and then combine it with one's own power to form the strongest attack, that is the true ultimate form of the absolute sword skill." "Is that so?" Lotus was speechless and smiled bitterly. So Grey Vase was hiding such an ultimate form? It's not that Grey Vase didn't want to teach you, but the use of the absolute sword skill will put a burden on the body. You should be very clear about this. Noah raised one of his hands. That hand was twitching. The broken form of ardent flower spiral sword dance will already put a huge burden on the body, so you haven't used it yet, let alone the ultimate form of absolute sword skill. With the strength of your body 3 years ago, you wouldn't be able to withstand that move, so Grey Vase didn't plan to teach it to you. After all, 3 years ago, Lotus was only a 14-year-old girl. Even if she went through the training of the academy in Grey Vase, how strong could a child's body be? In addition, a female's body was inherently weaker than a male's, so it was not without reason that Grey Vase didn't teach Lotus the absolute sword skill. Even Noah's body twitched like this after using the absolute sword skill. If Lotus used it, she might even lose her life. That's why it was so dangerous. Thanks to this, I can defeat you like this. Noah lowered his twitching arm, looked at Lotus and said, "You've lost, the strongest sword dancer." The entire place fell silent. Lotus was silent. After a while, Lotus closed her eyes. "You're right, I've lost," Lotus said with a calm expression. "You can take what belongs to you at any time." Hearing Lotus's words, Noah shifted his gaze and looked at Lotus's heart. There, only Noah could see a piece of feather floating in Lotus's heart like an illusion. It was because of this piece of feather that Lotus was able to obtain the power that was theoretically impossible for humans and perfectly control it. If Noah took that piece of feather away, Lotus's body would be instantly devoured by the power of the Dark Elf King and turned into a mass of resentment, right? Despite knowing this, Lotus's pretty face didn't show the slightest trace of fear. Instead, there was an indescribable sense of relief, because this is the end of what Lotus can do. Since birth, Lotus's entire life has been changed because of the existence of that piece of feather. Until now, she has been unable to break free of her fate. Because of the existence of the world fragment, Lotus was chosen by the Dark Elf King, who should have been a human male, and became the first female demon king in history. From that moment on, Lotus's fate was changed. Because of the power of the Dark Elf King, Lotus was abandoned by her parents. Because of the power of the Dark Elf King, Lotus was trained as a tool by the Teaching Institute. Similarly, because of the power of the Dark Elf King, Lotus was forced to become the Demon King. She may become the enemy of the 5 Elf Kings and even become the center of a dispute comparable to the ancient Elven War. At that time, who knows how many people will suffer because of this? Lotus has no way to change all of this. Therefore, after Noah appeared, Lotus showed a strong attachment to Noah. Lotus once said this to Noah: "Since you took the liberty of lodging in my body and changed my life and fate, then if you want to leave, you have to ask for my permission." This is the will that Lotus wants to express. Since life is destined from the beginning, the result must be decided by oneself. In the face of an unchangeable fate, Lotus chose what she wanted to do the most. That is, to do her best to prove herself. Thinking of this, Noah looked at Lotus, who was quietly closing her eyes, and opened his mouth. However, just as Noah was about to say something, a pitch-black lightning suddenly cut through the space and shot in the direction of Noah. Noah almost reflexively raised his arm and forced his body, which was still in pain, to suddenly swing his sword. Bang! The pitch-black lightning was suddenly hit by the silver holy sword and exploded like sparks, turning into pitch-black electric current, scattering to the surroundings. The sudden movement made Lotus open her eyes. In the next second, a figure with a black feather appeared in front of Lotus. "I won't let you touch Lotus." Celestia opened her arms and stood in front of Lotus. Her dusk-like eyes stared intently at Noah, and a resolute look appeared in her eyes. "Only if you kill me." "Lysia?" Lotus stood up in surprise. "You, don't talk." Lysia did not turn her head. Only Noah could see the sad expression on her face. "If you want me to get out of the way, then don't talk. I won't listen even if you say it." "Lysia." For the first time, Lotus's eyes wavered. Her expression became extremely complicated. Lysia, who did not see Lotus's expression, stared at Noah. She pointed a finger at him, and pitch-black electric light flashed on her white arm. "I know without Lotus I am absolutely no match for you." Lysia looked straight at Noah. "But, if you want to attack Lotus, then you have to kill me first." Lysia's whole body began to flash with pitch-black electric light. Chapter 18:17. Beep beep beep. Amidst the chaotic sound of electric shocks, Lysia's entire body was surging with intense black electric light, rendering the figure of the dark elf who stood at the highest position in her dark dress to look like the goddess of darkness who controlled lightning. She was extremely beautiful and heroic. However, in Noah's eyes, Celestia's power was just a bluff. As long as she lightly waved her sword, she would be able to cut the black lightning and the dark goddess into two halves. That was not a metaphor. Although Celestia was the dark elf of the highest rank compared to an existence like Noah, it was really just a matter of time. Even if he lost his authority, sovereignty, and ability value, with the unlimited energy from the third perpetual motion machine and the elven device that was comparable to the Elven King's power, Noah's power could still reach 4 digits. He was on the same level as the Elven Kings who ruled this world like gods. Compared to Noah, the power of the highest-ranked Dark Elf was like a joke that could be wiped out in the blink of an eye. Even if Celestia was created by the Dark Elf King and had the will of the Dark Elf King and was responsible for guiding the existence of the Demon King, it was still the same. Presumably, Celestia was also very clear about this. No matter what, facing someone who could defeat Lotus who had the power of the Dark Elf King, it was absolutely impossible for her to win. However, even if this was the case, it was not a reason for Celestia to obediently watch Lotus be dealt with by Noah. Noah was also very clear about this. If he really wanted to take away the world fragment from Lotus, Celestia would definitely resist with all her might. In the end, if he did not kill Celestia, he would not be able to take away the world fragment from Lotus. Looking at the stubbornness in Celestia's eyes, Noah sighed. "Enough, put away your hostility. I don't intend to take away the world fragment from Lotus's body now." Celestia was startled. It was not only Celestia but Lotus was also startled. Under the startled gazes of Lotus and Celestia, Noah said, "Right now, I don't have the means to safely extract a world fragment from a person's body, unless I dig out Lotus' heart. But if I do that, Lotus will definitely die. Since that's the case, I have no reason to do it under such circumstances." Upon hearing this, Lysia reacted. She stared at Noah, but the vigilance on her face did not disappear. Instead, it was Lien who spoke with a deep frown on her face. "Then you can take out my heart. I've already lost, so I won't resist." These words were mercilessly blocked by Noah. "Whether you die or not is your own business. My mood is more important." Noah curled his lips. "You want me to kill a guy who has no enmity with me and is not annoying in order to get something? I won't even be able to sleep well." "Then what do you plan to do?" Celestia stared straight at Noah. "Don't tell me you want to give that world fragment to Lotus? It's impossible to give it to Lotus. The importance of that thing isn't something you can imagine. If I don't take it out and let it return to its original state, countless lives will be lost," Noah said. "But it's not something that can be solved in a hurry. So I'll leave the world fragment with you for now. When I need it, I'll come back for it. Before that, you should explore the power in your body and try to use your own ability to control the power of the Dark Elf King." Noah glanced at Lotus. "Even if you don't mind being devoured by the power of the Dark Elf King, you should think carefully about who will be sad for you if you die. Lotus had nothing more to say. On the other hand, Celestia relaxed. She turned around, squatted down, and helped Lotus up. Looking at this scene, Noah lifted his head and shifted his gaze in another direction, looking at a corner of the sea of fire that was slowly burning around him. The show is over. It's about time for you to come out, right? As his voice fell, the sea of fire in front of him seemed to have expanded a little and burned even more fiercely. Then, the elf of calamity slowly walked out of the sea of fire. She glanced at Lotus, who was supported by Celestia, then at Noah, and her cold voice echoed. Since you're done with your task, you should give me an answer. I'll say it one more time. Lubia extended her hand toward Noah and Lotus. Lend me your power and fight against this world with me. Hearing this, Noah slightly frowned. Not only me, but you're also invited? Noah looked at Lotus and asked. Aren't you in cahoots? We're just working together. We're not in cahoots. Lotus shook her head. What I want is the same as her, but the methods we use are different. This was not the first time Noah heard this sentence. Lubia Elstian also said that her goal is to destroy the Elf King, but you want to save the Elf King. Moreover, you want to save the Elf King who has gone mad. Noah continued to ask. Then what's going on? Lotus immediately lowered her head and fell silent. Even Lubia just quietly looked at Noah without saying a word. In the end, it was Celestia who was silent for a while and suddenly spoke. I think you don't know that other than the human world and the elf world, there's a third world in this world, right? A third world? Noah was stunned and then said in surprise. Other than the human world and the elemental elf world, there's a third world? That's right. We don't know what that world is like, so we just called it the other world. Celestia bit her lip and said. But one day, without us knowing when, the door to the other world opened. And from the door, the other world's darkness flowed out. When the word darkness came out of Celestia's mouth, Noah clearly saw it. Whether it was Lotus or Lubia, their eyes were extremely heavy, and there was even a faint trace of fear. Noticing this, even Noah couldn't help but feel nervous. What exactly is it that can make the Demon King and the Saintess feel fear? What is this so-called darkness? Celestia didn't know if she could sense Noah's thoughts, but she opened her mouth and said, the other world's darkness can make the elves go mad, even the Elf King. With this, Noah understood everything. Could it be? Noah said with uncertainty. The Elf Kings have all gone mad because of the other world's darkness? Celestia didn't answer. But from the serious expressions of Lotus, Lubia, and Celestia, Noah already knew the answer. If this continues, both the human world and the elemental elf world will be destroyed by the Elf King. Lubia clenched her fists, and for the first time, a clear emotion appeared on her indifferent face. When I was still an elf concubine, I realized this fact, so I betrayed the Elf King and decided to destroy him. I want to create a world without elves and put an end to the other world's darkness so that humans can live. However, destroying the Elf King will not save the world at all, Lotus said in a voice that did not contain any confusion. Once the Elf King is destroyed, the consequences will be unimaginable. That's not saving at all. Unlike Lubia, Lotus and I want to save the Elf King who has gone mad. Celestia continued Lotus's words. As long as we can save the Elf King, we can save everything. Even if we can save the Elf King, it will only delay the destruction of the world, Lubia said coldly. As long as the Elf King still exists, the other world's darkness can once again erode their personality and make them go mad. Only by destroying the Elf King can we save the world and put an end to the other world's darkness. At this moment, Noah's gift card suddenly flashed in front of them. A piece of elf ore was released from the gift card. The elf ore flashed with a dazzling light, and an elf girl appeared in front of everyone. Immediately after, the elven girl hugged Noah fiercely. Her face was filled with intense fear as she cried out, "Darkness! Darkness! Darkness is devouring me! Devouring me!" Chapter 18:18. The sudden appearance of the elven girl stunned everyone present. However, the elven girl only hugged Noah tightly as if he was her savior. Undoubtedly, her body was petite, but her strength was so great that it made Noah feel some pain. Under such circumstances, the elf maiden's entire body trembled. Her face was filled with fear, as though she was a child who had a nightmare. She sobbed softly and murmured, "Darkness! Darkness is approaching." Darkness? Noah was really surprised. Could it be that this elven girl was related to the darkness of the other world? On the other side, seeing the elven girl who suddenly appeared and hugged Noah tightly, Lotus and Celestia were both shocked. That child. Could it be? What? Noah hugged the elven girl and turned his gaze to Lotus and Celestia. Do you know this child? Lotus and Celestia looked at each other and could see the surprise in each other's eyes. Then Lotus said, Don't you know who this child is? If I knew, I wouldn't ask you, Noah said mercilessly. But you too, how do you know this child? No, we don't know her. To be more precise, we have seen her before. Celestia's voice still had a trace of surprise. You don't know, but when Lotus won the Elven Sword Dance Festival 3 years ago, I had already told her about the darkness, and told her to assassinate the Elven King when she made a wish to him. At that time, Lotus successfully eliminated one of the 5 Elven Kings who had gone berserk, freeing the Elven King's original personality. What did you say? Noah seemed to understand what Celestia wanted to say and was extremely shocked. Could it be that this child is? It shouldn't be wrong. Celestia and I have seen her 3 years ago. Lotus looked at the elven girl closely. This child is the Water Elven King Isalia Shiva. As soon as she finished speaking, bang! An abnormally violent flame suddenly ignited and turned into a huge fireball, shooting in the direction of Noah. No, the target of the fireball was not Noah, but the trembling elven maiden who was hugging Noah tightly. The huge fireball was like a burning meteorite. Its size was comparable to a huge rock that could crush a human body, and it carried a shocking amount of heat. While the surrounding area was dyed a fiery red, it swept towards the elven girl. Once hit by such a huge fireball, not to mention a person, even a dragon would be burned to ashes, right? With the elven girl's current powerless body, there was no way she could withstand that level of attack. Once he was hit, he would die. Clang! Just as the huge meteor-like fireball was about to land on the elven girl's body, the elven magic equipment named Demon Slayer let out a crisp sword cry and turned into a ray of sword light, slashing through the huge fireball. Slash! Like a human body being cut open, the fireball was cut in half by the holy sword, which had absolute magic resistance, and dissipated with a tearing sound. Noah, who had cut the huge fireball in half, raised his head and looked at Lubia with an unpleasant expression. The attack just now was released by Lubia. Immediately, Noah took a deep breath and looked at Lubia coldly. What are you doing? Noah didn't get an explanation from Lubia for his question. I didn't expect to see the Water Elven King here. This is great. Lubia's pair of flame-like red eyes were fixed on the elven girl, and her voice was unprecedentedly cold. Although there seems to be a problem, this is a good opportunity. Suddenly, a scorching aura was continuously fluctuating from Lubia's body. Sensing the terrifying aura, Lotus and Celestia both reacted. Lubia. Lotus turned her gaze to Lubia, but her expression became quite serious. Do you want to destroy the Water Elven King here? That's right. Lubia stepped on the scorching flames and began to walk towards Noah and the elven girl. I won't miss such a rare opportunity. Lotus Asubble, you better not get in my way. I don't want to lose the precious battle force that can fight against the Elven King. Not only did Lotus not listen to Lubia's words, but she also took a step forward. However, her body, which had been hit by the ultimate sky flash, had not fully recovered. Lotus's body went limp and she directly knelt on the ground. Run. Celestia hurriedly supported Rowan. Don't force yourself. Although it's only a mental injury, your body has not recovered yet. Lotus immediately bit her lips and showed an unwilling expression. She could only watch as Lubia walked towards the elven girl. The elven girl, on the other hand, still did not seem to feel any danger. She hugged Noah tightly and murmured with a face full of fear. Darkness. Darkness. Due to the loss of her memories and power, the elven girl did not remember her identity. However, when she learned about the existence of darkness, from Lotus, Lubia, and Celestia, it seemed to have stimulated the elven girl's past memories and awakened the deepest fear in her heart. Noah knew that the elven girl, whose memories had been stimulated, had completely lost her calm at this moment. This could be felt from the way the other party hugged him tightly and trembled all the time. Thus, Noah whispered to the elven girl, I'm sorry, you should rest first. After that, Noah reached out a hand and pressed hard on the elven girl's neck. Ugh! The elven girl immediately groaned. Her body went limp and her eyes closed as she fainted. Noah hugged the elven girl's petite body and took out the elven ore once again. A ray of light flashed from the elven ore and enveloped the elven girl. The elven girl turned into light particles and was slowly absorbed by the elven ore. Then, Noah took out the gift card and stored the elven ore before letting the card disappear into the air. Seeing this, Lubia finally stopped and turned her red eyes towards Noah. Do you intend to obstruct me? Noah did not answer. Instead, he met Lubia's gaze and said indifferently, Have you asked if I agree to you taking people from me? Or even killing them? That is a threat to the world. Lubia said coldly. Do you want to see the world destroyed by the elven kings? That is not a threat to the world but a threat to humans. Noah smirked. You talk about the world and you talk about saving the world. If killing people could save the world, I would have become a man-killer fiend long ago. Saying this, Noah looked at Lubia without any emotion in his deep, dark eyes. Who do you think you are to talk about the future of the world in front of me? Lubia did not say anything else. However, the eyes of the elven girl of Calamity were filled with murderous intent as she looked at Noah. If that is the case, then disappear from my sight. As soon as she finished speaking, a violent flame rose from Lubia's body and shot into the air like a pillar of fire. The pillars of fire gradually twisted in mid-air, and gradually transformed into huge fireballs. They were like miniature suns suspended in the air. I won't show you any mercy, Noah Dole. Lubia's voice echoed in the air. Let me see what kind of power you can bring out to fight the Saintess after fighting the Demon King. Following Lubia's voice, the huge fireballs in the air suddenly trembled and turned into cannonballs. Like a meteor shower, they shot towards Noah's direction. His vision was filled with the color of the flames. His skin was sweating under the shocking heat. Noah stared at the flame barrage that descended like a meteor shower, and a terrifying light flashed in his eyes. Chapter 18:19. The scorching flames seemed to be able to incinerate the space around them. With an astonishing amount of heat, they turned into huge fireballs. Like miniature suns falling from the sky, they violently fell from the sky and violently shot towards Noah. Noah's pitch-black eyes had long been dyed a fiery red by the luster of the flames. They looked like intoxicating gems. Facing the flames that could instantly incinerate the surrounding area, Noah's expression did not waver at all. He only took a deep breath of scorching hot air, and his body surged with an enormous amount of divine might. In the next second, Noah actually ignored the huge fireballs falling from the sky. With a loud thud, he violently shot towards Lubia's direction like a bullet. Do you plan to take me down directly? Lubia calmly asked. Do you think it'll be so easy? While saying this, Lubia raised one of her hands. As if she was forming some kind of hand seal, her fingers constantly drew in the air. Suddenly, the huge fireballs falling from the sky paused and abruptly changed their direction. As if they had eyes, they madly fell towards Noah, who was rushing towards Lubia. In the blink of an eye, the first huge fireball arrived above Noah's head and mercilessly smashed down. Be careful! Lotus and Restia almost subconsciously cried out in alarm. However, before Lotus and Restia could say anything, Noah abruptly dodged to the side without any warning. Bang! The scorching huge fireball crashed onto the ground and exploded like a heavy meteorite. A surging wave of fire turned into a surging explosion of flames, shaking the ground that had been blasted open. It was mixed with a shocking shockwave, exploding in all directions. Scorched smoke rose from the ground that was covered by the wave of fire. The place that was hit by the fireball turned into a small volcanic crater. There were even flames rising from it. Noah acted as if he did not feel anything. His pair of eyes did not fluctuate in the slightest. His body violently dashed forward while constantly crossing paths. During this time, one after another, huge fireballs fell from the sky one after another. Bang 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 bang. Amidst a series of continuous explosions, huge fireballs fell from the sky and struck the ground one after another. Intense flames exploded, causing the scorching waves of fire to surge in all directions like a roaring torrent. Although its power was astonishing, it was useless if it missed. Noah dodged the falling fireballs with extreme precision. His body flickered like a phantom as he dodged the falling fireballs one after another. Instead of retreating, he charged forward like a thunderbolt towards Lubia's direction. Seeing how Noah accurately avoided all the fireballs, Lubia was somewhat surprised. He actually dodged all of them? What Lubia didn't know was that Noah had superb senses. It wasn't strange for him to avoid all long-range attacks like this. While Lubia was still feeling surprised, Noah's body suddenly trembled. His speed suddenly increased by more than 100 times. Like a bolt of lightning, he charged towards Lubia. Ultimate sword skill. Initial form purple lightning. The silver holy sword transformed into a sudden thrust at lightning speed. Like a running thunderbolt, it flashed through the air, causing a sharp sound of breaking the air. At such a close distance, it was impossible for Lubia to dodge the Godspeed thrust. Poochie! As if her body had been pierced through, the silver holy sword mercilessly pierced through Lubia's body. However, there was no trace of joy on Noah's face. Instead, his expression turned serious. He abruptly turned around and swung his sword at his back. Poochie! The same tearing sound was heard again. However, this time it was not the sound of the holy sword piercing through a human body. Instead, it was the sound of surging flames being suddenly cut off. Unknowingly, a wave of scorching flames surged towards Noah's back. Noah turned around and slashed with his sword, causing it to dissipate into the air. Within the flames, Lubia's cold voice slowly sounded. Did you see through it? After saying that, Lubia's figure emerged from the flames that had been cut off. As for Lubia, whose body had been pierced through by Noah's purple lightning, it was like a mirage. With a twist, it disappeared, using the steam generated by the burning flames to create an illusion. Your control of flames is beyond my expectations. Noah looked at Lubia and said calmly. However, if you intend to use this trick to save the world, I advise you to give up on your laughable ideals. Don't worry. Lubia looked coldly at Noah. What kind of power do I have? I'll show it to you later. The flames that had been burning around Lubia's body suddenly went berserk. Let me show you the most powerful spirit of the fire element, the god-killing flame. The raging flames that rose from Lubia's body suddenly surged and turned into a flaming light, gradually transforming into a different form. Amidst the flames, a gigantic flame giant with a red lotus wrapped around its body slowly appeared. It stood behind Lubia with an indomitable spirit. Looking at the flame giant, Noah's eyes flickered. Is that the most powerful flame spirit that the Elf of Calamity stole from the Elf King of Fire's sacrificial hall? The god-killing flame. It was known as the most powerful flame in the world of elemental spirits. If the Elf King of Fire was a god that controlled the element of fire, then the flame giant in front of him was the most powerful existence of the element of fire. Apart from the Elf King of Fire, no one could be more powerful than the flame giant in front of him. Although it was defeated by the Elf King and was sealed by him, the god-killing flame was definitely worthy of its name. It was a mythical spirit that far surpassed the demon god-level spirits. In terms of the power of the elves, the god-killing flame was many times more powerful than Lestia. Although it's not like the previous Saintess who has the most powerful sword spirit that even the Elf King is afraid of, this most powerful flame spirit should be enough to catch your eye, right? After saying that, Lubia softly chanted a contract in the language of the elves. The red lotus giant standing behind Lubia suddenly turned into a stream of flames that flowed into Lubia's raised hand and transformed into a sword. It was a magic sword that was completely red in color and burning with scorching flames. This is the most powerful elven equipment of the fire element Levitain. Rubia looked up and her gaze landed on Noah's body. Come and test its power, Noah Dole. She didn't give Noah time to reply. In the next moment, Lubia suddenly swung down the true red demonic sword that she had raised high. Bang! A muffled explosion suddenly sounded. The red magic sword released a frenzied flame that was like a tornado. It rubbed against the air and brought about vibrating sparks as it shot toward Noah. Bang 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 bang. The flaming tornado tore open the ground and flipped over the bricks and tiles of the sacred hall. It carried a terrifying heat as it swept toward Noah. Such a terrifying aura made Noah's face darken. However, Noah didn't retreat. Instead, he advanced like an arrow that was released from a bow. He fearlessly welcomed the flaming tornado that was shooting toward him. Clang! Endless divine might poured into the demon slayer, causing the sword to emit a dazzling light. Like a whirlwind, it fiercely struck forward. Boom! A roar suddenly sounded. The flaming tornado exploded, completely turning into a surging wave of fire, rolling out in all directions. The rolling wave of fire didn't attack the surroundings. Instead, it seemed to be pulled by an invisible force and flowed in a direction like a whirlpool. Over there, the silver holy sword vibrated with a phosphorescent divine might, absorbing all of the surging waves of fire and covering the sword. Immediately, Noah's figure swept out from the surging wave of fire. Under Lubia's gaze, he rushed in front of her. Ultimate sword technique. Form 4 flame slash. The holy sword that carried raging flames was like a thunderbolt as it slashed down. Chapter 18:20. When the blazing demon slayer ferociously chopped down, the space around the demon slayer began to distort with a sharp piercing sound. It was a phenomenon caused by being calcined by an unusually hot flame. This phenomenon caused Lubia's eyes to become serious. The god-slaying flame was known as the most powerful flame in the elemental realm. And now, the flames released by the elven device with the strongest flame attribute transformed from the god-slaying flames were condensed into a single sword by Noah's ultimate sword technique. That heat could definitely melt heavy steel into liquid in an instant. It was an absolute sword skill specifically used to counter the opponent's flames flame slash. Because it borrowed the opponent's flames, the more powerful the opponent's flames were, the more powerful the attack would be. Using the most powerful flame in the elemental realm to attack, the power of this move was so great that even Lubia couldn't ignore it. If it was someone else, even if it was Lotus, they would have a headache facing this attack. Unfortunately, as the contractor of the god-slaying flame and the former elven queen of fire, there was no human who knew how to deal with the power of flames better than Lubia. Thus, Lubia tightened her grip on the elven magic device called Levitain, causing the red magic sword to explode with a scorching flame. It was as if it was carrying a sea of fire. She raised the tip of the sword and slashed diagonally upwards. Clang! Amidst the crisp clashing sounds, the silver holy sword and the crimson demon sword collided heavily. Bang! The violent flames burning on the two pieces of equipment of the highest grade suddenly surged, entangling and devouring each other like an avalanche. During the entire process, an extremely terrifying heat spread throughout the entire space. Under such circumstances, the ground suddenly became like magma. First it was roasted red, then like butter it melted little by little. The terrifying heat forced Lotus and Lestia to increase the divine power in their bodies to resist the heat that could even melt the ground. As for the entire space of the Holy Church, it was like the inside of a volcano, turning into a scorching red color. With such heat in such a scene, it was as if one was really inside a volcano. At the center of the volcano, two figures were chasing each other. Clang! With a sword hum, the silver holy sword slashed out like moonlight. Swish! With a whistling sound, the true red demon sword suddenly flashed. The silver holy sword and the red demon sword were like two sword lights, continuously slashing towards each other. Clang 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 clang. The crisp sound of steel colliding with steel resounded throughout the entire volcano-like space, turning into waves of sound waves that reverberated. The cold sword light kept crisscrossing. The sharp blades kept colliding. It was as if Noah and Lubia were dancing. Their sword dance was pleasing to the eye and extremely intense. The clashing sounds of their swords colliding with each other shook the entire space. It was unimaginably intense. That pleasing and extremely high-end sword dance was enough to make anyone intoxicated by it. Even Lotus, who was known as the strongest sword dancer, was the same. Only those with extremely high attainments in sword dance would be able to clearly see this intense attack and defense, right? In Lotus's eyes, there was nothing she could find wrong with this sword dance. Noah, who was holding the silver holy sword, was constantly attacking. As he moved forward, he made the fairy device slash out like a whirlwind. Lubia, who was holding the red demon sword, was constantly retreating. Her footsteps were hurried and she seemed to be floating, constantly deflecting the whirlwind-like slashes. It is obvious that Noah has been on the offensive while Lubia has been on the defensive. Even so, the sword dance between the two was unimaginably intense. Neither of them was at a disadvantage. Pa! Footsteps sounded on the ground almost at the same time. Whoosh! Their figures were constantly dodging like phantoms. Clang 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 clang. The sound of the silver holy sword and the crimson demon sword clashing against each other reverberated in the air. Sparks flew in all directions from the clash between the sword and the silver holy sword. It was like a song, extremely pleasing to the ears. In the end, after a dozen rounds, the two fairy devices did not touch each other's bodies. In the entire process of the intense battle, the distance between the two was never more than 1 meter. Noah and Lubia continued to exchange blows under such circumstances. They performed an incredibly intense sword dance, making the atmosphere in the entire space more and more tense. Of course, no one knew how surprised Noah was. Is this girl really the former fire fairy G? It was no wonder that Noah had such a thought. It should be noted that Witch G of the Divine Rights Institute, whose goal was to serve the King of Elves, was very noble, and her attainments in the sacred music of ceremonies were extremely high. However, when it came to the sword dance, she didn't put any effort into it. Her fighting ability was almost the same as an ordinary person's. For example, Fianna almost always let Geochius perform on his own during the battle. She even let him focus on defense while she could only give simple orders. Her combat ability could be said to be the weakest among all the contestants in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. As a former fairy G, Lubia should have never been trained as a fairy envoy. She should not be so good at sword dance. However, at this moment, Lubia was actually able to fight Noah to a standstill. That was not normal at all. Could it be that after betraying the Fire Fairy King, Lubia began to train as a fairy envoy? Could it be that she was able to fight against Noah after 4 years? But Lubia was not Lotus. Lotus's talent in sword dance was unimaginably high. 4 years ago, after escaping from the academy, Lotus learned the ultimate sword skill from Gray and Vath for a year. 3 years ago, she dominated the Fairy Sword Dance Festival and won the title of the strongest sword dancer. This was enough to show Lotus's talent in sword dance. With such talent after 3 years of training, even Noah had to admit that Lotus's sword skill was comparable to Tony, who was known as the King of Swords. This showed how talented Lotus was in sword dance. And this was because Lotus had been trained in the academy since she was young, and had laid a solid foundation. That was why she could cultivate the ultimate sword skill to such a level after 4 years of training. But Lubia was only raised as a fairy G since she was young. She did not receive any proper training as a fairy envoy. How could she train the sword dance to such a level in just 4 years? Or did Lubia have a better talent than Lotus? Noah would rather die than believe such a thing. In such a world where humans were generally not very strong, it was already something to be proud of to have the strongest sword dancer. If there was another one, even Noah would not be willing to believe it. So Noah had a guess. I see. Not only did you inherit the power of the Saintess, but you also inherited the Saintess sword skill? Hearing this sentence clearly, Lubia's eyes flashed. Did you notice? Lubia very calmly deflected the silver holy swords one by one. She waved her sword and spoke. The Saintess is an antibody that corresponds to the Demon King. The stronger the Demon King is, the stronger the Saintess will be. When the Demon King, Lotus Asubble, fully awakens, my power will be raised to the peak. I am very lucky. In addition to the power of the Saintess, now that the Demon King has fully awakened, I have also inherited the Saintess sword skill. Lubia suddenly stopped retreating. So, in terms of power, I am not weaker than the Demon King. In terms of sword skill, I am not weaker than the strongest sword dancer. In addition, the power of my god-slaying flame is far stronger than the dark elf of the Demon King. My power is stronger than Lotus Asubble. After saying that, Nubia raised the red magic sword high up in the air and heavily chopped down at Noah with the power to split mountains and rivers. Clang! In the sound of a bell, Noah, who had blocked Lubia's attack with his silver holy sword, was sent flying by the powerful force. His feet rubbed against the ground as he slid backward. Chapter 1821. The highest level of sword dance had come to an end. A heavy silence pervaded the space. Noah tightened his grip on the holy sword. His hand was slightly numb, and he looked at Lubia with a solemn expression. Lotus and Restia, who were watching from the side, had a different expression. She said she's stronger than Lotus? Restia said with an unkind expression. That woman really dared to say that. But I have to say it's really irrefutable. Lotus smiled bitterly. I have the power of the Demon King in my body, and Lubia has the power of the Saintess in her body. The more thoroughly the Demon King's power awakens, the more powerful the Saintess power will be. When I perfectly awaken my power, the Saintess power that Lubia inherits will also become extremely powerful. She won't be weaker than me. Her power isn't weaker than mine, and her sword skills are inherited from the Saintess of Salvation. Since her power and sword skills are on the same level, then all that's left is to compete with the contracted spirits. Lotus turned her gaze to the true red demonic sword in Lubia's hand. Restia, it's true that you're the highest level dark elf, and your level is at the demon god level. But Lubia's god-slaying flame's power is far beyond the demon god level, and has even reached the mythical level. So naturally I'm weaker than her. Restia was speechless. In other words, Lotus wasn't weaker than Lubia, but she was weaker in terms of contracted spirits. The one who lost to Lubia wasn't Lotus but Restia. Restia could only feel helpless about this. After all, the god-slaying flame was known as the strongest flame in the world of elemental spirits, second only to the fire spirit king. Although Restia was the highest level dark elf, she wasn't the strongest dark elf. On the contrary, the god-slaying flame was the strongest flame spirit, and that was enough to explain everything. But Restia's dust-colored eyes looked at Lubia. How much did Lubia Elstian pay in order to form a contract with that flame sprite? Lotus didn't answer. This was because Lotus herself didn't know how much Lubia had to pay to successfully contract a mythical elf. Therefore, even if Lubia was stronger than Lotus with the god-slaying flame, that power couldn't be used for long. From a long-term perspective, Lubia's strength was too illusory. But it was undeniable that, at least at this moment, Lubia's overall strength was stronger than Lotus. Ren Celestia and Noah naturally understood this matter as well. Phew! Noah exhaled a mouthful of turbid air and raised his head to look at Lubia. Noah spoke. Since that's the case, I'll fight you with all my strength. His words stunned everyone present. Go all out? Lubia stared at Noah. Are you trying to say that you haven't used your full strength until now? No, in the battle with Lotus, I have already used my full strength, Noah said indifferently. So, instead of saying that I haven't used my full strength, it would be better to say that, just like the sky-extinguishing flash, I still have a trump card that none of you know about. Lubia narrowed her eyes. Lotus and Lestia stood up in surprise. Under such circumstances, Noah closed his eyes and chanted softly, Divine starlight, lightning of salvation, wisdom of the goddess, indestructible steel sword appear in my hand. The elven mark on the back of Noah's hand burst out with a dazzling light. It was not the unique silver light of the holy sword. It was the most dazzling light in the world, a platinum light. Amidst the light, a platinum-colored divine blade slowly appeared in one of Noah's hands. Clang! The platinum divine sword shone with a dazzling light. The light filled every corner of the surrounding space, causing the surrounding sea of fire to be reflected in a platinum color. The dazzling light made Lubia, Lotus, and Lestia squint their eyes slightly, their eyes filled with astonishment. A second elven? Lotus muttered in astonishment. He contracted a second elven? A dual contract? Lestia was also stunned. He's actually a dual contractor? His hidden trump card is a second elven. Lubia frowned and said sarcastically, How foolish, I thought you had something else up your sleeve. It was not unreasonable for Lotus and Lestia to be so astonished by Lubia's sarcasm. A dual contract was not a good thing. The more elves one contracted, the better it was. Forming a contract with two elves at the same time, and having multiple elves might be able to complement each other's weaknesses in battle, and display a variety of abilities. However, contracting elves would negatively affect each other. When an elven user formed a contract with two elves at the same time, the divine aura of the two elves would interfere with each other, causing the two elves to be unable to display their original strength. Therefore, under normal circumstances, no one would form a contract with two elves at the same time. Although Noah's second elven was beyond everyone's imagination, under a dual contract, the two elves would interfere with each other, causing his strength to decrease instead of increase. Thus, how could Lubia not be sarcastic? How could Lotus and Lestia not be astonished? However, no one knew. Although Noah's Athena was an elf, it was essentially Noah's authority. Under Noah's absolute control, Athena's power would not interfere with Aster's power at all. Thus, Noah held the demon slayer in one hand and the heavenly sword in the other, feeling the divine aura of the two flowing smoothly through his body. He raised his head and smiled at Lubia. "You'll find out whether I'm stupid or not." After saying that, Noah suddenly raised the platinum divine sword. Bloom lightning of salvation. The platinum divine sword suddenly trembled. Beep beep beep. In the next moment, dazzling lightning appeared on the divine sword. Amidst the intense sounds of collision, it was like a bolt of lightning that shot into the air and gradually converged into a violent pool of lightning. At this moment, Lubia's heart suddenly felt a sense of foreboding. Her pair of red eyes suddenly froze, and she abruptly stepped on the ground and retreated rapidly. Almost at the same time, the violent pool of lightning trembled. In the next second, a bolt of lightning violently shot out like a bolt of lightning. In an instant, it pierced through the air and landed heavily on Lubia's original position. Boom! The violent lightning blasted the ground with a loud bang, stirring up a sky full of rocks and powerful shockwaves that exploded in all directions. A huge hole appeared there, emitting scorched smoke, and the smell in the air changed. Looking at this scene, both Lotus and Restia were shocked. Lubia's pupils shrank, and her hand that was holding the sword suddenly tightened. This was not a power that a dual contractor could display. No, not only that, but the power that the divine sword displayed was also beyond everyone's expectations. While Lubia was still in shock, Noah's voice was extremely clear. "Now is not the time to be in a daze. If you don't take this seriously, don't blame me if you die." The moment his voice fell, the violent pool of lightning in the air seemed to have completely fallen into a state of rebellion, and suddenly began to rotate. Following the rotation of the pool of lightning, bolts of lightning fell like raindrops, and poured down in Lubia's direction like a storm. Lubia was shocked, and she hurriedly took a step back and retreated rapidly. Immediately, the thunderbolts that poured down like a storm mercilessly struck the ground. Boom 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 boom. In the midst of the deafening roar, the ground was continuously blasted by the thunderbolts. In an instant, dust and debris flew everywhere, and the shockwaves were like real stormy waves, turning into a passing typhoon that swept in all directions. Lubia could only continuously dodge, avoiding the violent thunderbolts that fell from the sky, and let the thunderbolts fall one after another on the ground, shattering the bricks and tiles of the sacred hall. This scene was extremely shocking. Chapter 1822. Bang! 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 The violent lightning continued to wreak havoc in the great hall of the Holy Church, causing the muffled sounds of explosions to reverberate in the air. Under the direct impact of the lightning, the ground had long been filled with craters, becoming riddled with holes and potholes. The hall, which was originally covered by a sea of fire and looked like the interior of a volcano, suddenly became shaky under the direct strikes of the lightning. It was as if it could collapse at any time. It was frightening. Under such circumstances, the violent lightning bolts continuously shot out from the lightning pool floating in the air and mercilessly struck the ground. Chi! A faint sound of thunder rang out, causing a lightning bolt to fall directly towards Lubia, who was dodging. Lubia, who had just dodged a lightning bolt, was in a state where she had yet to recover her strength. There was no way she could dodge it. However, Lubia's body suddenly trembled violently, and her entire body became somewhat illusory at this moment. Bang! The lightning bolt fell violently and solidly onto Lubia's body. However, both Lotus and Celestia saw it clearly. The lightning bolt did not hit Lubia. Instead, it passed through Lubia's body without any hindrance, causing the illusory figure to explode. At the same time, not far away, Lubia, who was holding the crimson demon sword, appeared with flames burning all over her body. She was completely unharmed. The illusory figure just now was obviously just another illusion created by Lubia using the evaporating airflow. However, Lubia's breathing began to quicken. Noah, who was holding the platinum divine sword, looked at Lubia and said indifferently, "What? That's not enough?" Lubia's expression suddenly became somewhat unsightly. After a while, Lubia took a deep breath and calmed her somewhat rapid breathing. She looked at the heavenly sword in Noah's hand, and the demon slayer in his other hand, and said in a deep voice, "I didn't expect you to be able to perfectly control two elves." Lubia was not the only one who did not expect this. Even Lotus and Lysia were surprised. There was another thing that was even more unexpected. That was, at the same time, Noah's two elves were extremely powerful. Aster was the most powerful sword elf that even the Elven King was afraid of. Athena's strength was also not below Aster's. There was no doubt that both of Noah's elves had surpassed the mythical level. Yet, Noah was able to form a contract with both of them at the same time. It was like a joke. Forming a contract with the most powerful sword elf will lead to death. Lubia's gaze towards Noah had changed. Yet, you're able to form a contract with another powerful elf under such circumstances. What price did you pay? Shouldn't I be the one asking you this question? Noah looked at Lubia with a faint smile on his face. Do you have the right to say that? Lubia was speechless. After a while, Lubia lowered the truer demonic sword in her hand. Her eyes flickered. Your strength is beyond my imagination. If possible, I really don't want to be your enemy. As she said this, Lubia's eyes flickered with an indescribable emotion. I'll say it again. I must save this world. I can't just watch the world be destroyed by the Elven King. So, give me the water, Elven King. The entire place fell silent. At this moment, everyone could see the emotion in Lubia's eyes. It was not the coldness of the past, nor was it the intense emotion. Instead, it was a strong sense of mission. This girl had already made saving the world her mission. Since the day she discovered that the Elven King had been corrupted by the otherworld darkness, this girl had been yearning for salvation. Unfortunately, Lubia's wish was undoubtedly wrong. I won't agree to it, Noah said calmly. No matter what, when there is a sacrifice, it can no longer be counted as salvation. You who take sacrifice for granted will never be able to save this world. Lubia's eyes flickered violently. At this moment there was a slight wavering in Lubia's eyes. However, that trace of hesitation immediately disappeared after a second. Hoping for salvation without sacrifice is the most naive thinking. As she said those words, violent flames rose from Lubia's body and turned into a sea of fire that instantly lit up the entire Holy Church's sacrificial hall. I won't pray that there won't be a sacrifice. I will only minimize the sacrifice. Even wars between countries can't avoid sacrifice. You want to fight against the world and expect a perfect ending? You're so naive that it's laughable. As if in response to the anger and unwillingness in Lubia's words, the flames that lit up the entire Holy Church's sacrificial hall rose with the wind and turned into a monstrous wave of fire. If you want to protect everything, then try and defeat me. As soon as she finished speaking, the monstrous wave of fire suddenly trembled and surged toward Noah's direction. Suddenly, wherever the wave of fire passed, the space was distorted by the shocking heat and even the air began to evaporate. Facing the monstrous wave of fire, Noah was like a tiny ant that would be killed in an instant. However, looking at the monstrous wave of fire that was surging toward him, Noah showed a fearless expression. Clank! The platinum divine blade burst out with a dazzling light. Holding the dazzling divine blade in his hand, Noah spoke in a loud voice. If defeating you can protect everything, then I will never lose. The platinum light shining from the divine blade was as dazzling as the sun. It was so dazzling that no one could look at it directly. Immediately, Noah's voice rang out clearly. Bloom, O light of salvation. The dazzling light turned into a dazzling flash. Like a beam of light, it pierced through space and shot out with a terrifying power that made one's hair stand on end. It directly faced the monstrous wave of fire that was surging toward him. Kaboom! An earth-shattering roar resounded and turned into rolling sound waves, causing the entire burning sacred hall to tremble violently. The dazzling light and the monstrous wave of fire collided heavily, stirring up layers of energy ripples. It was like an invisible shock wave, also shaking in all directions. However, this situation did not last for long. After a while, the attack from the divine blade of salvation, which could even cut a star in half, only lasted for a moment. Then the light grew brighter. Then the light suddenly pierced through the wave of fire. Poof! In the clear sound of cloth tearing, the dazzling aurora cut through the wave of fire and separated the heat. It was as if it had split the sea of fire and dispersed the monstrous flames. Wah! Lubia's expression changed drastically. Her eyes were filled with disbelief. At this moment, in the midst of the monstrous wave of fire that was violently dispersed, a figure rushed over like a meteor. Duh! With a powerful landing sound, Noah's figure suddenly appeared in front of Lubia. Lubia's pupils shrank to the size of a needle tip. She had no time to be shocked. She forced her body to retreat. However, it was already too late to react. Wang! Amidst the vibrations, a vast amount of divine power surged into the holy sword and divine saber, causing the two highest-grade elven magic devices to flash with a dazzling light. Absolute sword skill. Form breaker. Ardent flower spiraling sword dance 48 consecutive slashes. The silver holy sword and the platinum divine blade suddenly danced, interweaving into an absolutely unavoidable sword formation that bloomed in front of Lubia like an exploding flash of light. Under the horrified expression of Lubia, the sword dance was unleashed on her mercilessly. Poochie 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 poochie. Continuous sounds of slashing rang out. Ah! Lubia's sorrowful cry rang out as well. Chapter 1823. Whoosh! The scorching flames were still burning in the great hall of the holy church, but the heat was not as terrifying as before. Within the sea of fire, Rubia Elstian fell heavily to the ground. Her pair of red eyes seemed to have lost their luster, becoming dull and lifeless. Clang! The dazzling radiance of the demon slayer and the heavenly sword also began to dim bit by bit. Noah held the two elven magic devices tightly. Looking at Rubia, who had fallen to the ground, his breathing became rapid again. Pain came from every part of his body once again. The hands holding the holy sword and heavenly sword also began to tremble. Feeling every muscle in his body twitching, Noah could not help but laugh bitterly. Using the final style and then breaking style, this result is natural. As the final style of the ultimate sword skill, Noah's body had already suffered some side effects when he used the ultimate sword skill. The breaking style of the ardent spiraling sword dance was the most powerful move of the ultimate sword skill, so the side effects were also very large. At least, the side effects that Noah was suffering now were definitely much greater than when Lotus used the ardent spiraling sword dance. First, when Lotus used the ardent spiraling sword dance, the combo was only 36, but Noah used 48 combo of the ardent spiraling sword dance. The more powerful the ardent spiraling sword dance was, the more powerful the side effects were. Second, as mentioned before, the breaking style of the ardent spiraling sword dance was originally the ultimate sword skill of the dual sword school. Even if Noah and Lotus could use one weapon to use the ardent spiraling sword dance, the power of the ardent spiraling sword dance was definitely not as strong as when they used two weapons. Now Noah used two weapons and used the complete version of the ardent spiraling sword dance. Not only did the power of the ardent spiraling sword dance increase, the side effects on the body also increased. In addition to the burden on the body when he used the ultimate sword dance, Noah could still move, which meant that his body was strong. Noah, who was silently enduring the pain from every part of his body, raised his eyes and looked straight ahead. Cough cough. Lubia coughed violently a few times. Just like Lotus, she coughed out a mouthful of blood and blood dripped from the corner of her mouth. She struggled a few times but couldn't get up. How hateful! Lubia squeezed out a hateful voice. Undoubtedly, her whole body was already twitching, but she was still struggling with difficulty, as if she didn't allow herself to fall. It was quite crazy. However, doing so was undoubtedly tormenting oneself. Looking at Lubia, who was struggling to get up, Noah couldn't help but speak. Give up. You've already lost. Hearing this, Lubia shuddered. Lost? Lubia repeated as if she was sleep-talking. Then her eyes seemed to have a final burst of light, and her will was once again ignited. No, I haven't lost yet. This sentence was only met with a sigh. Stop deceiving yourself, Rubia. With Lysia's help, Lotus came in front of Lubia. She lowered her head and looked at the disastrous elven concubine. After taking such a blow, it's impossible for you to stand up again. After taking the full brunt of Noah's divine might, as well as the demon slayer and heavenly sword, which were the most powerful ultimate sword skills of the elven devices, Lubia could no longer stand up. Even if Noah had turned the elven device into a weapon that could damage the mind, it was already a miracle that Lubia was still conscious and did not faint after taking such a blow. As for standing up, that was already impossible. At least it was impossible for her to do so now. Rubia should be the clearest about this. So what? Lubia bit her lip and wriggled her body desperately. No matter what, I can't lose here. I still have things to do. If I lose here, then I can't do anything. Although she kept saying that she was stronger than Lotus, Lubia knew that the reason she had such power was because she was the reincarnation of the Saintess. The stronger the Demon King was, the stronger the Saintess would be. As long as the power of the Dark Elf King remained in Lotus's body, and was fully awakened under the influence of the world fragment, Nubia would be able to obtain a power that was no weaker than Lotus's from the 5 Elf Kings because of the antibodies created by the 5 Elf Kings. On the contrary, if the Demon King's power in Lotus's body weakened, then as the Saintess, Lubia's power would also weaken. After all, it was not Lubia's own power, but the power of the 5 Elven Kings. In other words, it was impossible to use this power to fight against the 5 Elven Kings. Therefore, Lubia could only think of using Lotus and Noah to make these two fight for her. Unfortunately, both Noah and Lotus did not agree with Lubia's idea. If that's the case, at least now that the Water Elf King is in trouble, I can use this power to destroy them, even if it's just one of them. Lubia raised her head with difficulty and looked at Noah and Lotus with eyes full of hatred. Why do you have to stop me? Under those words full of hatred, the divine power fluctuating from Lubia's body began to become violent. Ugh! Lubia suddenly covered her heart and let out a painful groan. Seeing this, Lotus and Lestia were slightly surprised. Noah was also surprised. What's wrong? Could it be that the ardent spiraling sword dance just now caused some unexpected damage? Just as Noah was thinking about this, Athena's voice suddenly sounded. Look carefully at that elf's body. Hearing this, Noah was startled again. He immediately stepped forward, squatted down and rolled up Lubia's sleeves. When Lubia's skin was exposed in front of everyone sucked in a cold breath. This was because Lubia's arms were densely engraved with countless ferocious seals. That's... Lestia was shocked. Spell engravings. That's right. The dense and ferocious carvings on Nubia's arm were all spell carvings. Looking at this scene, Lotus gritted her teeth. Ignoring Noah's presence, she squatted down and took off Lubia's military uniform. The next moment, everyone was speechless. The scene that entered everyone's eyes, in addition to the snow-white skin and the slender and graceful figure, there were only innumerable spell engravings. How many were there? How many were there? Or tens of thousands? In short, the countless spell engravings were like hideous scars all over Lubia's body. Except for her head, neck, and the back of her hands, there was not a single part of Lubia's body that was unscathed. Even Lotus was shocked. Don't you want to live? Spell engravings would bring severe side effects to the user's body and mind. In the past, there were countless elven users who were completely crippled because of a single spell engravings. Even Gravath had lost her power as an elven messenger because of the spell imprint in her heart, so how could anyone else do the same? Yet, Lubia's entire body was covered in spell engravings. She was simply courting death. Even Noah thought so. Once upon a time, Versilia also had a large number of spell engravings, but she went completely insane overnight. In the end, it was Noah who used the Demon Slayer to break the spell engravings on her body, saving her life. And the number of spell engravings transplanted on Lubia's body was much more than Versilia's. Could this person have been suffering from the backlash of so many spell engravings all this time? How in the world did she survive? Seeing Lubia's expression becoming more and more pained, Noah took a deep breath and raised the holy sword in his hand. Aster, can you get rid of these spell engravings? No problem. Aster's voice immediately sounded. What? Lotus asked in surprise. You want to save her? Hearing this, Noah smiled bitterly. If I don't save her, Claire will hate me. After saying this, Noah stabbed the holy sword into Lubia's body. Chapter 1824. Ugh! When Rubia regained her consciousness, she immediately understood the current situation. Obviously, she had fainted. Moreover, all the runes on her body began to backfire. After understanding this, there was only one question left in Rubia's mind. I'm still alive. The runes on her body were all over her body. No one knew better than Lubia what would happen if there was a backlash from such a large number of rune engravings. Rubia knew that she would not be able to survive. Even if she had been able to endure the side effects of the curse engraving, it was impossible for her to survive the backlash of the curse engraving on her body. In fact, before she fainted, Rubia had already prepared herself for death. However, Rubia was not afraid. If she was afraid of death, She would not have implanted so many runes on her body. Rubia only felt regret. The regret of not being able to fulfill her wish. With such regret, Rubia fainted and quietly welcomed death. In the end, when she regained her senses, she was bewildered, which was rare for her. When she opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was an old ceiling. Rubia understood the situation almost immediately. She was not in the sacred hall where she fought before. The sacred hall had been baptized by 2 high-level battles. It was impossible to preserve such a complete ceiling. Therefore, Rubia's current location had been moved. Through someone's hands. Rubia sat up abruptly. As soon as she sat up, a voice entered Rubia's ears. "You're awake?" Hearing this voice, Rubia immediately turned her head and looked at the source of the voice. In front of a bonfire, Lotus, who was wearing a witch costume, was looking at Rubia. Next to her was a pitch-black magic sword. Beside Run, Noah also sat down and leaned against a wall. He glanced at Rubia and said, "Don't worry about it. I thought you would never wake up again." Hearing this, Rubia did not speak. Instead, she first looked around. There were only 3 people present. Noah, Lotus, and Rubia. The location was probably inside a building in the abandoned city. From Rubia's position, she could clearly see that there was a wall in front of her that had been completely destroyed. Only half of it remained. Through the wall, Rubia saw a burning holy church. The sacred hall was obviously the location of their battle. Now that place was gradually turning into ruins, scorched black by the flames. Through this scene, Rubia obtained 2 pieces of information. The first reason was that this place was not far from the holy church. The first reason was that he hadn't been unconscious for long. Otherwise, the holy hall would not still be burning. It would have been reduced to ruins long ago. Looking at the sky, although it was still dusky, it should be noon. Combining all the information in the current situation, Rubia seemed to understand the whole story. There was no doubt that she had been saved. And according to Rubia's understanding, there was only one person who could save her. So Rubia silently pulled up her sleeves. On his skin, the scar-like spell runes had completely disappeared, allowing his skin to return to its original white and flawless state. After feeling the condition of her body, Rubia could tell everyone with certainty. All the spell runes on her body had been removed. No, it wasn't just the spell runes. It seems that you've discovered it. Lotus had been silently watching Rubia's actions until now. That's right, it's not just the spell runes. Your elf mark has also been removed. Elf mark. It was the proof of a contract between an elf user and an elf. With the elf mark, the elf user could open a door for the contracted elf to pass through and summon the contracted elf at any time. Without the elf mark, it could only mean one thing. That was, Rubia had lost her contracted elf. The god-slaying flame, which was known as the strongest flame in the elemental elf world, was now no longer Rubia's contracted elf. Understanding this, Rubia was silent. Seeing Rubia like this, Noah raised his eyebrows and said with a half-smile, "You don't seem surprised at all." "There's nothing to be surprised about," Rubia said calmly. The god-slaying flame was originally a mythical-level elf that was defeated by the 5 elven kings in the past elven war, and was sealed by the 5 elven kings. That level of elf is not something that humans can contract in the first place. I was already prepared for the contract to be abolished. Isn't that a bit contradictory? Lotus retorted. If it's not an elf that humans can contract, then how did you make a contract with it? That's because the god-slaying flame hates the elven king who sealed it, and my goal is to destroy the elven king. That's why it lent its power to me. Rubia's expression was extremely indifferent. However, as the price of the contract, in the end I will have to pay with my life. Noah and Lotus's eyes flickered. Sure enough, making a contract with a mythical-level elf definitely required a heavy price. A contract with your life as the price, Lotus said in a low voice. So that's how it is. Is your exaggerated rune engraving to maintain this impossible contract? Rubia had taken the god-slaying flame from the Fire Elven King's sacrificial hall 4 years ago. In other words, Rubia's contract with the god-slaying flame had been maintained for 4 years. Logically speaking, a contract that required one's life as the price should not be maintained for so many years, let alone a mythical-level elf that was impossible to make a contract with a human. That was why Lubia had covered her body with so many spell runes, using countless spell runes to bind the strongest flame elf and maintain this contract for 4 whole years. Because I lost to you, the spell runes began to bite back. This contract cannot be maintained any longer, right? Lubia's pair of red eyes turned to Noah. If that's the case, according to the price of the contract, the god-slaying flame should have come out to take my life the moment the spell runes on my body were removed. But Lubia was still unharmed. What was this all about? Noah could see Lubia's confusion. However, Noah pursed his lips and said, "Don't worry about it. Although my body is not in good condition after 2 battles, and Lotus was seriously injured by me, you don't think that a mythical level elf can successfully kill someone from our hands, do you?" Mythical level elves were almost invincible to humans, but to Noah and Lotus, they were not very strong opponents. Even if their bodies were not in good condition, when the god-slaying flame intended to take Lubia's life, Noah and Lotus still took action. The result was obvious. The strongest flame elf, known as the strongest flame elf in the elemental elf world, was defeated by Noah and Lotus. Thus, the elf ran away with its tail between its legs. At this point, Lubia's life was saved. Lubia fell silent. After a while, Lubia said self-deprecatingly, "I didn't expect that in the end, I would be saved by the 2 of you. Fate is really interesting. There's nothing strange about it, right?" Lotus said faintly, "Our ideals are different, but our ultimate goal is to save the world from the hands of the crazy elf king. There's no reason for me to leave you in the lurch." "I'm not that kind." Noah shrugged. "I just don't want to see my teammate cry because of her sister's death." Needless to say, Lubia knew who Noah's teammate was. She did not know if it was because she was reborn, or because she lost her contract with the elf and lost to Noah, but Lubia's heart was no longer as cold as before. Instead, she had become a little soft. Under such circumstances, Lubia could not help but speak. "Is Claire okay?" Noah did not expect Lubia to ask such a question. However, this question caused Noah to cast his gaze on Lubia. Soon after, he bluntly said, "Don't worry, Lubia. As the younger sister of the elf maiden of calamity, do you think Claire will be fine?" Lubia was speechless. Chapter 1825. Lubia's betrayal to the Fire Elf King caused the Elstian family's title to be stripped and their territory confiscated. Even Lubia's parents were arrested by the Ordesian Empire and imprisoned. Her sister betrayed her, her parents were imprisoned, and all of her assets were confiscated. Claire was left alone. A little girl who is only 12 or 13 years old has been enduring the hateful gazes of others while silently honing her skills, all for the sake of one day winning the Elven Sword Dance Festival and learning the truth of her sister's betrayal. She has endured for 4 years. Noah looked directly at Lubia. "Do you think that's good?" Facing Noah's question, Lubia couldn't find the words to refute. She could only remain silent. "Perhaps, in your opinion, in order to save the world, some sacrifices are unavoidable. You can even abandon your own family." Noah sneered. "But, in my opinion, if a person can't even protect their own family, then they can't protect the world. You were wrong from the beginning." Noah's voice echoed clearly in the surroundings. Lubia was silent, and Lotus lowered her head, not knowing what to say. The atmosphere suddenly became tense. After some time, Lubia suddenly spoke. "At the border of the Ordesian Empire, there is a small city called Deluz." Noah and Lotus were slightly stunned. Lubia ignored Noah and Lotus's shock and continued. "Because of the climate in Deluz, the harvest of crops has always been very insufficient. The people pray for sufficient crops, so they have been continuously offering offerings to the Elf King." Lubia's eyes flickered slightly. But 4 years ago, Deluz ushered in a long drought, causing the harvest of crops to become very low. 4 years ago? Noah and Lotus's hearts skipped a beat. 4 years ago. At that time, anyone would have a reaction. Because that was when Lubia betrayed the Elf King. Since Lubia mentioned this matter at this time, it probably had something to do with him. And just as Noah and Lotus thought, this matter did indeed cause a change in Lubia's life. That year, the residents of Deluz were unable to prepare enough offerings. As a result, they angered the Fire Elf King. Lubia unconsciously clenched her fists. After that, Deluz was attacked by a rain of fire for 3 days and 3 nights, completely erasing it from the map. Noah and Lotus were stunned. Destroyed because of insufficient offerings? Just because of this, an entire city was mercilessly destroyed? No matter how they thought about it, it wasn't normal. It's very abnormal, right? I also think it's very abnormal. Rubia bit her lip as if she had read Noah and Ren's thoughts. And that was also the reason why I began to doubt the Elf King. Such an abnormal phenomenon didn't only happen once. While Rubia was serving as the elf concubine, news of the Elf King destroying a place kept coming from all over the continent. And the reason was often due to an extremely insignificant mistake such as insufficient offerings. In that year alone, more than a dozen cities were destroyed because of the Elf King's anger. Rubia's voice became angry. In the end, the Fire Elf King that I served actually began to ask for an offering from me. Noah and Lotus looked at each other. It was very common for high-ranking elves to ask for offerings from humans. The purpose of the divine ceremonial courtyards which Ji was to use the ritual music she had learned as an offering, allowing the elves to perform all kinds of miraculous effects. Even elven envoys would offer their divine power to their contracted elves as an offering to sign a contract with them. Therefore, it wasn't strange that the Fire Elf King would ask for an offering from Rubia. The only problem was that the offering the Fire Elf King asked for wasn't something that could be accepted by humans. At that time, the Fire Elf King asked for the Elstian family's true fire as an offering. Rubia's voice seemed to be squeezed out from the depths of her throat as she spoke. In other words, he wanted me to offer my sister, Claire, as an offering to him. What? Lotus was shocked. Even Noah furrowed his brows, a thoughtful look appearing in his eyes. There were elves who asked for a living person as an offering. However, those were all evil elves. Those elves were defeated by human heroes one after another, and became legends of powerful elven envoys. Noah had seen many similar records in the sanctuary's library. Some of them were even written into novels and passed down for hundreds of generations. However, as the ruler of the elemental elves, the Elf King actually asked for a living person as an offering. Noah had never even heard of such a thing, let alone seen it. In the beginning, I couldn't believe it either. In order to make the Elf King withdraw his request, I continuously prayed to the Fire Elf King, performing ritual music every day until I lost consciousness and fell to the ground, incessantly praying for the Elf King's forgiveness. Rubia's face was full of bitterness. In the end, not only did the Elven King not accept my pleas, he even gave me an oracle. He told me that if I didn't offer him a sacrifice, he would continue to rain calamities on the same level as Duluth's. In other words, if I didn't offer Claire as an offering, the Elf King would rain down his wrath on the Audiobook Empire? This wasn't just anger, it was anger and threats. So I despaired. Rubia raised her head and looked at Noah and Lotus. In the end, I could only make up my mind to personally meet the Elf King in the Temple of True Sacrifice. The Temple of True Sacrifice. Unlike the Temple of True Sacrifice and the other temples, it was the true holy land of the elemental elves. This was because the true bodies of the 5 elf kings were in the Temple of True Sacrifice. It was the holy land of the elves, the holy land in the hearts of humans, and an absolute taboo place. As the residence of the elf kings, the Temple of True Sacrifice prohibited any human or elf from entering. Once you entered, you would die an unnatural death. This included the elf concubines who directly served the elf king. Directly meeting the Elf King in the Temple of True Sacrifice was an absolute taboo. However, in her despair, Rubia could only choose to break this taboo and go to the Temple of True Sacrifice. It was then that I saw. Rubia's voice began to tremble. The scene of the otherworldly darkness devouring the Elf King. Hearing Rubia's words, Lotus's eyes also wavered and her entire body began to tremble. Celestia said that 3 years ago, Lotus won the Elven Sword Dance Festival and went to the Temple of True Sacrifice to make a wish. At that time, she launched an assassination attempt on the Elf King and successfully killed the Water Elf King's crazed personality, releasing the original personality of the Water Elf King. Then Lotus must have seen the otherworldly darkness like Rubia, right? It was only then that I understood that the Elf Kings had already gone mad, Rubia said in a low voice. If we continue to keep those crazy elf kings, one day, the world will be destroyed by the 5 elf kings. It will be the same for both the human world and the elemental world. As someone who knew the truth, there was only one thing that Lubia could do. That was to shoulder all the sins and fight against the rulers of the world. Noah was silent. He didn't expect that the reason why Lubia betrayed the Elf King was because of Claire. If it wasn't for Claire, Lubia wouldn't have broken the absolute taboo and gone to the Temple of True Sacrifice to meet the Elf King and see the otherworldly darkness. If Claire knew the truth, she would definitely be in disbelief, right? I don't regret doing so because I have to do so. I can't continue to serve the culprits who threaten this world. Lubia stared straight at Noah. You're right. If a person can't even protect their family, then they can't protect the world. Perhaps I was the same at that time. That's why I betrayed the Elf King without hesitation, right? Noah's expression became complicated. The truth was actually like this. Since you don't agree with my ideals, then let me see how you're going to save this world. Lubia closed her eyes. I'll see the end. All of a sudden, the surroundings became silent. It was so quiet that it was difficult to breathe. Chapter 1826. After that, Lubia did not say anything else. She leaned against a wall and fell into a deep sleep. The girl's body had not fully recovered yet. The battle with Noah had severely damaged her spirit. The backlash from the spell engraving had also severely damaged her body. Even though Noah had used Aster's power to remove the spell engraving on Lubia's body, the side effects of the spell engraving were still there. For example, even though the spell engraving on Versilia's body had been removed, the backlash from the spell engraving had caused her to lose her ability as an elf. It was the same for Gray and Vaz. After teaching Noah the ultimate secret of the ultimate sword technique, the backlash from the spell engraving had caused the strongest elf to become a legend. Lubia did not lose her ability as an elf. After all, as long as the Demon King's power in Lotus' body was still in an awakened state, the Saintess' power in Lubia's body would not disappear. Lotus had said that with perfect control of the Dark Elf King's power, she could even achieve an indestructible body. Lubia's Saintess' power also came from the Elf King, so it should not be too bad. Therefore, under the protection of the Saintess' power, Lubia did not lose her ability as an elf. However, Lubia's body had not fully recovered and needed some time to rest. The girl did not mind that Noah and Lotus were beside her and fell into a deep sleep. Noah was also not worried that this troublesome elf would cause any trouble after she recovered. Even if Lubia's Saintess' power was still there, it would not be too difficult to deal with her after losing her contract with an elf. At least that was the case for Noah. Therefore, Noah did not bother with Lubia and let her rest. The bonfire was still burning, and the branches inside were crackling. Noah and Lotus looked at the bonfire in front of them and fell into their own world. After an unknown amount of time, Lotus finally spoke. What are you going to do? If these words were said by someone else, they would definitely feel quite puzzled and confused, right? However, Noah knew what Lotus was talking about. Nubia seems to have given up on destroying the Elven King. In that case, I can also prepare to free the Elven King without any scruples, so that the Elven King can be freed from his madness. Lotus looked at Noah. What about you? What are you going to do? Noah pondered for a moment and asked, 3 years ago, how did you assassinate the Elf King and free the Water Elf King? The Hall of Sacrifice where the Elf King resided was an absolute forbidden area. No one was allowed to enter. The only exception was the winner of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. The winner of the Elven Sword Dance Festival could enter the Hall of True Sacrifice and make their wish in front of the 5 Elven Kings. For this reason, after Lotus learned about the existence of the Otherworld Darkness from Lysia, she entered the altar hall as the winner of the Elven Sword Dance Festival and assassinated the Elven King. However, even if Lotus had the power of the Dark Elf King, it would still be very difficult for her to assassinate the 5 Elf Kings. It was a very simple algorithm. Lotus was alone. There were 5 Elf Kings on the other side. Even if the Dark Elf King was stronger than the other Elf Kings, it would still be impossible for him to fight against 5 Elf Kings alone. Otherwise, the Dark Elf King would not have been defeated during the Elven War, and chose to reincarnate. Based on this, Lotus should not have used a direct attack but some other method. Noah felt that it was necessary for him to understand this. Lotus did not expect Noah to suddenly ask such a question. After hesitating for a while, she replied, I found the opportunity to assassinate the Elf King by making a wish. Making a wish? Noah was stunned. After hesitating for a while, he said with uncertainty, "Are you referring to the wish that you can make to the Elf King when you win the Elven Sword Dance Festival? You can assassinate the Elf King with that? Isn't that strange?" "Don't be surprised. I did use the wish to obtain the opportunity to assassinate the Elf King," Lotus said. "You must think that the wish of the winner of the Elven Sword Dance Festival was granted by the Elf King, right?" "Why?" Noah asked. "Isn't that the case? The miracle of the Elven King's servant. The power that can grant wishes is not released by the Elven King himself. Instead, it is similar to a ritual, a system. After it is set up, it will begin to operate," Lotus explained. "Therefore, when the winner of the Elven Sword Dance Festival makes a wish to the 5 Elf Kings in the Hall of Sacrifice, the miracle will do its best to grant the wish." Hearing this, Noah more or less understood what Lotus was trying to say. In other words, when the winner of the Elven Sword Dance Festival makes a wish in front of the Elf King, the miracle system will immediately operate, ignoring the Elf King who set up the ritual and grant the wish itself? "That's right." Lotus nodded. "Even if the wish is not beneficial to the Elf King, the miracle will immediately operate and bind the Elf Kings who are the executors of the miracle. Is this the so-called self-enmeshing? It was this miracle system that gave Lotus the opportunity to assassinate the Elf King. That day, I only made one wish in the Hall of Sacrifice." Lotus looked straight at Noah. "That is the death of the Elf King. I believe that no one has ever made such a wish before. Perhaps even the Elf Kings who set up the miracle system did not expect that one day, someone would use this miracle to make such a wish. But if this wish can really be granted, then you don't have to worry about the Mad Elf King destroying the world, and you don't have to assassinate the Water Elf King yourself." Noah noticed the key point. After you made the wish, you should have realized that something impossible would happen, right? "Yes." Lotus sighed. "After all, the miracle power is a system used by the 5 Elf Kings to grant wishes on their behalf. It will not destroy the Elf King who is the executor. Therefore, even if you make such a wish, it will not be granted. However, before it is determined that the wish is invalid, the miracle power will still work," Lotus said. "During this period of time, this power would bind the Elf King, making him unable to move. I took advantage of this opportunity to assassinate the Water Elf King, destroying the crazed personality of the Water Elf King, and releasing the original personality of the Water Elf King. If this is the case, then as long as there is a certain degree of power, perhaps even an ordinary elf envoy can successfully assassinate the Elf King. However, the Elf King being bound does not mean that the otherworld darkness will be bound," Lotus said solemnly. "During the assassination of the Elven King, the otherworldly darkness would definitely appear. At that time I also experienced its terror. 3 years ago, if I hadn't been able to use the power of the Dark Elven King, I would have definitely been swallowed by the otherworldly darkness." According to Lotus's description, 3 years ago, after the assassination of the Water Elf King was successful, a large amount of the otherworld darkness gushed out from the Water Elf King's body. At that time, if Lotus had not been able to use the power of the Dark Elf King to forcibly break out of the encirclement, and if Restia had not used the teleportation magic to leave the Hall of Truth at the critical moment, the consequences would have been unimaginable. After that, I originally wanted to return to Gray and Vaza's place to continue honing my sword dance skills. When the time was right, I would find an opportunity to free the other Elf Kings. But before that I met Lubia. Lotus glanced at Lubia's direction. After knowing that Lubia betrayed the Elf King because she knew the truth about his madness, I accepted her invitation and acted with her. For the past 3 years I have been hiding in the Alpha Empire. Then, Lotus learned about Noah's appearance and followed the guidance of the world fragment. She left the Alpha Empire and found Noah. Noah also knew what happened after that. So, if you want to use the same method as me to free the Mad Elf King, then I only have one thing to say to you. Lotus stared at Noah and said word by word. Be careful of the otherworld darkness. Don't let your elves come into contact with the darkness. Otherwise, even if you are fine, your elves may go completely crazy. Don't forget. Noah pondered for a moment and nodded heavily. Chapter 1827. Just like that, time passed by mercilessly. In the blink of an eye, the second night of the abandoned city had arrived. Night was the time when magical fairies were most active. As such, just like last night, large numbers of magic fairies began to appear in the abandoned city, causing it to become quite lively. Among them, there was even a small number of magical fairies. Magical fairies had a very special brain structure to begin with, and were thought to be absolutely impossible to contract and communicate with. The only people who could contract and communicate with magical fairies were people like Gray and Vaz, who had the potential to become magical fairies. If they encountered magical fairies, under normal circumstances, the magical fairies would attack humans without any explanation. Under such circumstances, if the opponent was still a demon god level magical fairy, it would be a fatal situation. Therefore, on the night of the abandoned city, the contestants of the Elven Sword Dance Festival who were still on the stage would choose to hibernate and rest, right? After all, not everyone could be like Noah, Lotus, and Lubia, who had the power of the Elven King that could govern all the elements in the world and was equivalent to a god. For Noah, Lotus, and Lubia, magical fairies were existences that could be casually dealt with. Only mythical fairies required a bit of effort, but it was only a bit of effort. As for human magical fairies, only Gray and Vaz, who were known as the strongest magical fairies in the continent, had the power to kill magical fairies alone. This was enough to prove the difference between human magical fairies and abnormal existences like Noah, Lotus, and Lubia. Even without Noah, Lotus was the reincarnation of the Demon King, and Lubia was the successor of the Saintess. Both of them were more or less stronger than the previous Demon King and Saintess because of the existence of the world fragment. To say that they were abnormal existences was not wrong at all. In this way, normal magical fairies could not ignore the threat of magical fairies. Even the trump cards of the various countries were the same. However, as existences whose power in this world exceeded the scale of scale, Noah, Lotus, and Lubia also stayed inside a building and rested under the light of a bonfire. Noah leaned against a wall and fell into a deep sleep. Lotus sat in front of the bonfire and closed her eyes to rest. Lubia, who had been resting with her eyes closed for the whole day, suddenly opened her eyes slowly. Looking at Noah, who was in deep sleep, and Lotus, who was taking a nap, Lubia propped up her body, raised her hand, opened and closed her palm. After feeling the condition of her body, she muttered to herself in a self-deprecating manner, "Have you fully recovered? Should I say that this is truly the power of the Saintess of the 5 great elf kings?" After muttering to herself, Lubia got up and walked to Noah. Looking at the defenseless Noah sleeping in front of her, Lubia was stunned for a long time. After a long time, Lubia murmured again, "Let me see how you're going to face the truth of this world." After saying that, Lubia took out a magic stone and gently placed it in Noah's hand. It was the magic stone that belonged to Lubia. After losing the magic stone, it wouldn't be long before Lubia would be teleported out of this abandoned city. Before that, a voice entered Lubia's ears. "Are you going to hand everything over to Noah?" The voice from behind did not surprise Lubia in the slightest. As if she already knew that the other party would speak, Lubia spoke with a calm face. "Since I've already lost, it's useless to say anything more. Losers don't have the right to express their ideals. Only winners can keep moving forward. What I have to do is more or less finished." "Is that so?" Lotus opened her eyes and stared at the bonfire in front of her. She did not look at Lubia at all. "So what are you going to do next?" "I'll wait and see." Lubia did not look at Lotus and directly answered, "Before this elven sword dance ends and before Noah Dole makes a wish in front of the Elf King, I won't do anything. As for what will happen after that, I'll make a decision based on the situation." Lubia closed her eyes. "I hope your idea of saving the Elf King won't die prematurely." When these words came out of Lubia's mouth, a magic square slowly flashed under her body. Lubia's body turned into a ray of light and merged with the magic square. Then she disappeared with the magic square. From the beginning to the end, Lotus did not look at Lubia's direction. She did not even watch Lubia leave. She quietly sat there and looked at the bonfire. The light of the fire reflected in her eyes. "Is it really okay to let Lubia Elstian leave just like that?" Lestia's voice came from the black magic sword that was leaning on the side. "Maybe she hasn't given up on the idea of destroying the Elf King? It's okay." Lotus picked up a branch and threw it into the bonfire. In this world, only Noah and I have the ability to destroy the Elf King. Lubia's Saintess power came from the 5 Elf Kings. It's impossible for her to destroy the master of that power. In this situation where neither I nor Noah agree with her idea, even if she wants to destroy the Elf King, she can't do it. In the face of the gods and rulers of this world, the power of humans was too weak. Not everyone in this world could be like the lucky ones in the world of the Godslayer, who relied on luck and opportunity to kill the gods. The reason why Lotus could surpass the limits of humans was because of the power of the Dark Elf King. The reason why Lubia could surpass the limits of humans was because of the power of the 5 Elf Kings. As for Noah, Lotus did not know what kind of existence he was. The reason why Lotus could perfectly awaken and control the power of the Dark Elf King was because of the thing in her heart that Noah called the world fragment. Being able to know the existence of that thing, Noah was already mysterious enough. Therefore, even if she did not know how Noah could surpass the limits of humans, Lotus did not doubt this man. Because Lotus had a feeling. This man would not betray the world. No. It should be said that it was absolutely impossible for Noah to betray the world. That was right. Lotus, who was thinking this, did not know. In fact, Noah did not fall into a deep sleep at all. Noah clearly heard the conversation between Lotus and Lubia. As for Lubia's departure, Noah was also aware of it. Pretending to be asleep, Noah was silent for a while. After a while, Noah spoke in his mind. Is it okay to let Lubia leave like this? Aster? After a while, Aster's voice sounded in Noah's mind. It's okay. Aster gave the same answer as Lotus and said so. Lubia Elstian is Alicia's successor, but she is not Alicia in the end. Aster's voice was emotionless as usual. However, Noah could hear the faint emotions in Aster's voice. In it, there was relief and disappointment. Relief because the master who died because of his curse did not appear in front of him, so Aster did not know how to face it. Disappointment because Alicia did not come back to life. For Aster to be able to hide such conflicting feelings in his plain words, it was truly amazing. In this regard, Noah did not know what to say. On the other hand, Athena's voice echoed in Noah's mind. If you want great power, it is natural to pay a price, Athena said softly. Holy Sword Spirit, you are an existence that even the Elven King has to be wary of. If you want to obtain your power, it is natural to pay a price. Perhaps you think that the Saintess of Salvation was harmed by you, but I must tell you that it was her choice. If you keep feeling guilty, then you are denying her choice. Aster was silent. However, Noah also wanted to agree with Athena's words. Alicia knew about the curse a long time ago, but she still chose to use you. Noah said, if it were me, I would not want you to see my choice as your own fault. If that happened, I would be sad. Aster did not say anything else. Noah and Athena also fell silent and did not say anything else. Noah only hoped that Aster could use this opportunity to walk out of the shadow of the past. That would be good. Chapter 1828. There really was no sunlight during the day in the abandoned city. Even though dawn had arrived, the sky was still the same as it was 2 days ago. It was gray and there was no sign of life. However, the magical fairies that were active at night had begun to quietly retreat and hide their whereabouts, proving that the day had arrived. Even though there was no sunlight, Noah still woke up from his sleep. The bonfire had been extinguished and was no longer burning. It emitted a faint burnt smell that was slightly pungent. In front of the bonfire, 2 girls sat side by side and were gnawing on bread. The 2 girls were naturally Lotus and Lysia. Perhaps they did not notice that Noah had woken up. Lotus and Lysia gnawed on the bread in their hands while chatting. From Noah's point of view, this scene was like a pair of sisters chatting. It was quite heartwarming. From this, it could be seen how close Lotus and Restia were to each other. Of course, if their relationship was not good, after Noah defeated Lotus yesterday, Lysia would not have stood up to face Noah alone and protected Lotus. These 2 girls had always been together since they were young. The bond between the 2 of them was so deep that it was impossible for outsiders to understand, right? Just as Noah was thinking this, Lysia, who was chatting with Lotus, suddenly turned her dusk-like eyes to Noah and spoke with a faint smile. You're already awake but you're still hiding and peeping. Is this also your interest? As Celestia spoke, Ren reacted and looked at Noah as well. Under the gazes of the two girls, Noah curled his lips. You're not changing or bathing. What's the benefit of peeping? Oh, Lysia immediately revealed a mischievous smile. In other words, if we're changing or bathing, you'll peep? Who knows? Noah said indifferently. Why don't you try it first? Celestia blinked and turned her gaze to Lotus. That's what she said. Do you want to try? Don't be ridiculous, Lotus said helplessly. That won't do any good either, right? Hee. Restia pursed her lips and laughed. Her laughter was as pleasant as the ringing of a bell, making one feel relaxed and happy. Throughout this process, Celestia didn't stop nibbling on the bread in her hand. Elves didn't need to eat. However, many elves actually like to eat human food to satisfy their appetite. Therefore, when humans worship the elves, they would usually offer food as an offering, even if the target was the elf king. Of course, not all elves liked human food. Take Athena for example. Before she became an elf, when she was still a god, she never ate. After she became an elf of God's blade, she had no intention of changing. That's what I said. Although it's natural for the gods and elves to consume the offerings offered by humans, for a warrior, the only way to continue fighting is to not rely on food. Even if I'm no longer the goddess of war, there's no need for me to cater to the interests of humans. That was what Athena said. Even if she was no longer the god of disobedience and would not be swallowed by the arrogance of the god of disobedience, as a former goddess, Athena's arrogance still existed. Noah had no reason to refute her. Besides, not eating wouldn't have any effect, so Noah let Athena do as she pleased. On the other hand, Aster was sometimes interested in human food. He would often appear when Noah was eating, like a small animal waiting to be fed, asking for food from Noah. It was very cute. Unfortunately, the conversation last night seemed to have enlightened Aster, and it seemed like he wouldn't appear today. Moreover, Lysia seemed to be an elf who liked human food too. Looking at the appearance of the highest dark elf nibbling on the bread with relish, Noah couldn't help but laugh. Then, Noah glanced at the magic stone in his arms. It was the magic stone left behind by Lubia when she left last night. Noah's expression didn't change as he kept the magic stone. Then, he straightened his body and went to the extinguished bonfire. He took out a piece of pancake from his gift card and ate his breakfast. Seeing that Noah kept the magic stone left behind by Lubia, Lotus turned her gaze to Noah. It seems that when Lubia left, you didn't fall asleep. Aren't you the same? Noah said casually. Moreover, instead of saying that you didn't fall asleep, you should say that you already knew that the Elf of Calamity would do this, right? Lubia's thinking has always been very extreme. When she knew that the Elf King had gone mad, she wanted to destroy them. After she lost to you, she felt that she didn't have the right to express her ideals and left directly. Lotus laughed bitterly. But if that's the case, I can be sure that Lubia won't think about destroying the Elf King anymore. What about you? Noah asked directly. Are you still thinking about saving the Elf King? That's what I'm thinking. Lotus nodded slowly. The Elf King is also a victim. We don't have a reason to destroy them because of this. My plan is to end the matter between you and me during the Elven Sword Dance Festival, and win the festival. Just like 3 years ago, I will release a few more Elf Kings as the winner of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Will you be able to release all the Elf Kings with this method of yours? Noah said in a doubtful tone. 3 years ago, you only released 1 Elf King. Even if you do it again, you can only release 1 or 2 Elf Kings at most. Are you planning to release the rest of the Elf Kings during the next Elven Sword Dance Festival? Is that even possible? The time of the Elven Sword Dance Festival was not fixed. Whenever the Elf Kings wanted to hold the Elven Sword Dance Festival, they would inform their elf concubines through the oracle and let them announce the edict. In the past 30 years, the Elven Sword Dance Festival had only been held 3 times. 3 years ago, 15 years ago, and 24 years ago. Then, who knew when the next Elven Sword Dance Festival would be held? Moreover, the Elven Sword Dance Festival could only be attended by elf envoys below the age of 20. Lotus was already 17 years old. It was unknown if she would be able to participate in the next Elven Sword Dance Festival. Therefore, it was unrealistic to use this method to release all the Elf Kings. Lotus naturally understood this point. Therefore, Lotus spoke with a serious expression. My initial plan was to release the remaining 3 elf kings at once. Although it was a little difficult, it was not impossible. 3 pillars? Noah was stunned. You released 1 elf king 3 years ago. There should be 4 elf kings left, right? However, that was what Lien said. No, there are only 3 elf kings left. Lotus's expression became serious. 3 years ago, I only saw 4 elf kings in the Hall of Sacrifice. The Holy Elf King's seat in the center was empty. Empty? Noah was shocked. The Holy Elf King's seat was empty? Why? Don't ask me why. I don't know either. Lotus said directly. Even Rubia and Restia don't know why. How would I know? Hearing this, Noah looked at Restia. Restia nodded her head, confirming Lotus's words. Noah's brows immediately furrowed. It was another piece of unexpected news. No matter what, we should first release the remaining 3 elf kings in the Hall of Sacrifice. That was my previous plan. Lotus sighed. But now that I have lost to you, I can no longer win the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Hearing this, Restia raised her eyebrows and opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something. However, before she could, Noah spoke. Haven't you always wanted to know what I would do after knowing that the Elf King had gone crazy? Noah suddenly smiled. Now I will tell you. After saying that, Noah directly voiced his thoughts. After knowing Noah's thoughts, Lotus and Restia widened their eyes in disbelief. However, at the same time, the 2 girls' hearts burned with passion. If what Noah said was true, then all their problems would be solved. Chapter 1829. Bang! Accompanied by a heavy muffled sound, a figure suddenly flew out from a street in the abandoned city and smashed heavily onto the ground. He slid for a distance before coming to a stop. It was an elven envoy wearing a red and white uniform with strange patterns drawn on it. Judging from the uniform, this young girl was an elven envoy from the Holy Roha Kingdom. In other words, this young girl was a member of the Saint Knights. As an elven envoy from a kingdom on the same scale as the Holy Roha Kingdom, and being able to represent the Holy Roha Kingdom in the finals of the Elven Sword Dance Festival, this young girl's strength was unimaginable. However, at this moment, this elven envoy was knocked to the ground without any ability to retaliate. The intense pain from her body made her groan. Damn! Damn it! The young girl could only lie on the ground and raise her head with difficulty, casting her gaze forward. There, a man and a woman were slowly walking over. They were none other than Noah and Lotus. The young girl glared at Noah and Lotus with resentment and spoke with a hoarse voice. Why is the male elven envoy and the strongest sword dancer together? The 2 of them were not from the same kingdom, nor were they companions. They were even enemies, so why would they be together? No matter how she thought about it, this elven envoy from the Holy Roha Kingdom couldn't figure it out. Of course, Noah and Lotus didn't need to explain it to her. After all, the resentment in the elven envoy's eyes made them feel uncomfortable. However, Noah and Lotus weren't surprised by the other party's reaction. During the preliminaries of the Elven Sword Dance Festival, Noah had defeated the other 2 elven envoy teams from the Holy Roha Kingdom. Moreover, he had ruthlessly turned the tables on them when they were looking down on a group of students. He had already offended the elven envoys of the Holy Roha Kingdom. During the finals of the previous Elven Sword Dance Festival, Lotus had defeated the trump card of the Holy Roha Kingdom and won the championship. It was impossible for these people to have a good impression of her. The result was like this. Therefore, there was nothing much to say to each other. Lotus stepped forward and took away the magic stone from the elven envoy. The elven envoy wanted to resist but was powerless to do so. Clang! A magic array immediately appeared under the elf and brought him back to the high shrine. Holding the demon stone, Lotus tossed it to Noah. That's the 3rd piece. That was right. Since the morning, Noah and Lotus had been hunting in this abandoned city, and they had encountered 2 enemies. The first one he encountered was the Dragon Emperor Knights of the Dragon Duchy of Drago. The other party had 2 people working together, but they encountered Noah and Lotus. They couldn't even escape and were directly knocked down by Lotus, who took away 2 Devil Stones. The second time, he encountered the Saint Knights of the Kingdom of Divine Georgia. It was the elf envoy from before. Naturally, the other party did not even have the chance to escape and was directly dealt with by Lotus, resulting in the previous scene, which allowed Lotus to obtain the third magic stone. However, Lotus gave all 3 magic stones to Noah. For the sake of Noah's plan. In order to realize Noah's plan, it was necessary to enter the high shrine and directly meet the Elf King. Therefore, Lotus gave up the chance to win and chose to work together with Noah. She even began to assist Noah to win the Elven Sword Dance Festival. In the finals of the Elven Sword Dance Festival, only Lotus and Rubia could pose a threat to Noah. Now Rubia had withdrawn and Lotus stood on Noah's side. The result was naturally that the two of them dominated this abandoned city. There was no other possibility. Now we have defeated 1 member of the Saint Knights and 2 members of the Dragon Emperor Knights. Noah tossed the magic stone in his hand. In addition to the magic stones of Red Lotus, Maoya, and Lily from your Purgatory Apostles, and my own magic stone, I have 7 magic stones. Today is the last day of the finals. There are less than 3 hours until the end of the competition. Lotus held the black magic sword and said, "Before that, I will give you the 2 magic stones that I have. That way you will have 9 magic stones. It shouldn't be a problem for you to win the competition, right?" The only teams that entered the finals of the Elven Sword Dance Festival were Fairy's Tale, Purgatory Apostles, Saint Knights, and Dragon Emperor Knights. A total of 4 teams. Each team had 5 people, so 4 teams would have 20 people. All the magic stones added up to 20 people. Noah alone obtained almost half of the magic stones. Unless someone else obtained the rest of the magic stones, there was no way they could win. Still a little risky. Although it's difficult, we can't be sure that no one will obtain the rest of the magic stones. So, it's best to obtain 1 more magic stone to ensure that we have half of the magic stones. That way we won't lose. As he said that, Noah noticed something else. He looked at Lotus. "Alright, you have 2 magic stones. One of them is yours, right? Who does the other one belong to? Is it the Saint Knights of the Holy Kingdom, or the Dragon Emperor Knights of the Dragon Duchy of Draconia? Don't tell me it belongs to my companion?" "Neither." Lotus shook her head. "That is the Purgatory Apostles' magic stone." "The Purgatory Apostles' magic stone?" Noah was stunned. "You attacked your companion?" "To be more precise, it should be said that the other party attacked me," Lotus said calmly. Sarah Khan, the princess of the Alphys theocracy. She is also a member of the power that believes in the Demon King. She has always had her eyes on me, but she couldn't find a chance to attack me. Until this finals, when everyone would be randomly teleported, Sarah Khan found me. As for the result, there was no need to mention it. In the face of the Demon King who had fully awakened the power of the Dark Elf King, a human elf was just like an ant. How could there be a second ending? Noah was not familiar with Sarah Khan, but he faintly remembered that at the beginning of the preliminaries, when he found the Purgatory Apostle, she looked at him with a scheming and insidious gaze. That gaze made Noah very unhappy. So, at that time Noah conveniently got rid of her. Since Noah could easily get rid of Sarah Khan, if Lotus wanted to deal with Sarah Khan, it would be just a matter of convenience. However, you are right. In order to ensure victory, it is necessary to obtain another magic stone, Lotus said. Although you can achieve your goal as long as one of your companions is not eliminated, but perhaps your companion has already been eliminated. You can't rely too much on this kind of uncertain thing. Noah nodded. At this time, Noah and Lotus' heart slightly moved. They turned their heads and looked in a certain direction. There a figure slowly appeared. As soon as she appeared, her gaze landed on Lotus. "I finally found you, Lotus the Subtle." Hearing these words and seeing the full appearance of the other party, Lotus' eyes flickered as she softly said the other party's name. Luminalise Saint Richette. The newcomer was the ace general of the Holy Tuya Kingdom. 3 years ago, she was defeated by Lotus in the finals of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. She was the rumored holy elf envoy Luminalise. It wasn't just Luminalise. Whoosh! Almost at the same time, a gust of wind rose in the sky. A pitch-black dragon flew over, flapping its wings as it hovered above everyone, looking down at them from above. On the back of the giant black dragon, the ace general of the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia looked down at the 3 people below with a joyful smile on her delicate face. "It seems that I came at the right time." "Indeed, I came at the right time." Noah Doragonia, Lotus the Subtle, Rayla Lancaster, Luminalise Saint Richette. On the last day of the finals of the Elven Sword Dance Festival, less than 3 hours before the end of the competition, on a street in the center of the abandoned city, the ace generals of the 4 teams representing the 4 countries gathered together. Chapter 1830. Whoosh! Strong winds howled on the streets, stirring up a large amount of sand and dust. The entire space seemed to be a little blurry. Noah, Lotus, Leola, and Luminaris observed each other from a distance. Noah and Lotus even looked at each other and saw the helplessness in each other's eyes. I didn't expect to meet Leola on the last day. Noah shrugged. That lass has been watching me. She'll probably find me later, right? I'm in the same situation as you. Luminaris will probably find me too. Lotus smiled. But she came at the right time. With Leola and Luminalis magic stones, Noah would have a total of 11 magic stones. He would definitely be able to win the competition. With less than 3 hours left in the competition, it was a blessing from the heavens to meet an opponent. Although Noah and Lotus were the ones who were found, Leola, who was flying in midair, looked at Noah and Lotus who were standing side by side. Her delicate face was filled with doubt. Why would Noah and Lotus be together? Not only were they elven messengers from different countries, but they also seemed to have fought on the first day of the Elven Sword Dance Festival preliminaries. In that case, Noah and Lotus should be enemies. Why would they be together? Leola couldn't help but think of the first day of the finals. That day, didn't Leola, who had her divine power stolen by the crippled elf, also act together with Noah? Since Leola, who was also an enemy, could act together with Noah, it wasn't strange that Lotus Asubble would act together with Noah. After this thought flashed through her mind, Leola suddenly smiled. The 2 elven messengers who were known as the strongest in the Elven Sword Dance Festival were able to meet on the last day of the finals. This might be the blessing of the dragon god. However, there's still only one person that I want to defeat the most. Leola looked at Noah with a burning gaze. That's you, Noah Doria. I know. Noah curled his lips and smiled. It's not that I haven't considered it. If I meet you again, I'll satisfy you a little. Seems that now is the best time. That's right. Leola's expression became joyful. Then, as though she recalled something, she turned around and looked at Luminaris. Holy elf messenger of the Holy Kingdom, you won't stop me, right? I should be the one saying that. Luminalis didn't even look at Leola. She didn't even look at Noah. She only looked straight at Lotus and said as such. Just as you said. Even though there are 2 elven envoys who are rated as the strongest here, there is still only one person I want to defeat the most, and that is Rin Asubble. After that, Luminaris gathered a flash of light in her hand. The light turned into a pure white holy sword that Luminaris gripped tightly in her hand. Holding the pure white holy sword, Luminaris pointed at Lotus from afar, her eyes full of determination. Luminaris, you haven't forgotten the finals 3 years ago, right? Of course I haven't forgotten. Luminaris nodded. You were the only one who gave me a tough battle during the Elven Sword Dance Festival 3 years ago. I still remember you. After saying this, Lotus muttered in her heart. Of course, I didn't use the Dark Elf King's power during the Elven Sword Dance Festival 3 years ago. Even under such circumstances, Lotus had only fought a slightly bitter battle against Luminaris. It was imaginable that even without the Dark Elf King's power, Luminaris was still much stronger than ordinary human elf messengers. The title of the strongest sword dancer wasn't just for show. Luminaris didn't know about this. However, Luminaris couldn't forget the Elven Sword Dance Festival 3 years ago. Actually, I was very confident that I could win that battle because you were using a dark elf and I was using a holy elf. My advantage was too obvious when our attributes countered each other. Luminaris clenched her teeth. However, even with such an obvious advantage, I still lost to you in the finals of the Elven Sword Dance Festival 3 years ago. Today I finally have the chance to take revenge on you. I won't run away. Lotus accepted Luminalis' challenge with a straight face. Besides, I'm still using a dark elf. Let me see how strong you've become in the past 3 years. On the other side, Leola also leaped down from the sky. The pitch-black dragon transformed into a ray of light that gathered in Leola's hand and transformed into a pitch-black greatsword. Holding the pitch-black greatsword in her hand, Leola raised her eyes and looked at Noah. Her eyes flashed with eagerness to give it a try. This time I must determine the winner with you. Noah met Leola's gaze and nodded after seeing the intimidating look in her eyes. This is also the last chance. I won't run away either. As soon as he finished speaking, a small silver sword appeared in Noah's hand. It gradually emitted a dazzling light and slowly turned into a shiny silver steel sword. The body of the sword shone with an intense sharpness. Noah, who was originally worried that Aster might not be in the right state and was considering if he should use Athena, finally calmed down. He grasped the silver holy sword in his hand and felt the divine power coming from Aster. He then looked at Leola. Come on. Let's end this battle before the end of the competition. Hearing this, Leola showed a fearless smile. That's exactly what I want. As soon as she finished speaking, dong! Leola abruptly stomped on the ground, and her figure suddenly shot out. The elven device in her hand spun like a whistling windmill, and even the air was directly torn apart. With a sharp sound of wind breaking, she violently slashed in Noah's direction. Before the sword arrived, the whistling wind had already hit Noah's body, causing Noah's skin to feel a little stinging pain. Just like before, she had a monstrous strength that was astonishing. After being strengthened by the dragon attribute elven magic, which was known as the highest level of physical strengthening, Leola's physical strength was firmly above Noah's. Therefore, Noah naturally wouldn't be foolish enough to face Leola's monstrous strength head-on. He took a step forward and leaned his body to the side in a strange manner. Swoosh! The sharp greatsword with a chilling intent brought along a sharp gust of wind as it fell close to Noah's body. However, Leola wasn't surprised at all. I knew you'd be able to dodge it. After saying those words, Leola directly raised her fist. Her slender fist suddenly moved, and like a heavy hammer, it abruptly blasted out. Noah didn't expect Leola to suddenly use close-range combat. However, Noah wasn't startled by it. He took another step forward and leaned his body to the side again, allowing Leola's fist to graze his chest. Immediately after, Noah also raised his hand that wasn't holding a sword and suddenly pressed down on Leola's fist that had missed its target. He pulled Leola's body fiercely and directly rammed his shoulder into hers. Bang! A muffled sound was heard. Ugh! Leola let out a muffled groan and abruptly retreated a dozen steps. She clutched her chest with a dejected look on her face. Sure enough, I guessed it right. Noah smiled faintly. In order to strengthen your strength to the limit, you relax the strengthening of your defensive power. After all, no matter how much you strengthen your defensive power, it's impossible to block the holy sword that killed the Demon King with your body, right? Leola took a deep breath and pointed her pitch-black greatsword at Noah. If that's the case, I'll use all of my divine might to strengthen my strength. As long as I can hit you, I'll be able to cause considerable damage. A wise choice. Noah looked straight at Leola and chuckled. However, it's useless if I can't hit you. Then I'll think of a way to hit you. Leola's eyes burned with scorching battle intent once again. The wyverns of Dalagonia will go all out even when hunting lions. Moreover, you're not a lion but a demon god. If that's the case, I'll give everything I have and fight you to the end. Seeing the astonishing battle intent burning in Leola's eyes, Noah withdrew the relaxed smile on his face. Then come at me.